You witch! You have ruined everything! Get out of here now! Me! How can you say that? You are the one who caused this mess! You knew about this and you said nothing! Get out of my family's house now!
They were going to kill her. Not with weapons, with bills. Mom Ngozi stared at the invoice for 50 yards of gold asoebi fabric and felt her soul trying to leave her body through her ears. The paper trembled in her hands, not from the harmattan wind whipping through the palace courtyard, but from pure, unfiltered terror. Around her, chaos reigned like a dethroned king. 500,000 naira. The caterer's voice cut through the afternoon heat like a machete through sugarcane. A woman built like a Jej bread truck, she jabbed her finger so close to Mom Ngozi's face that she could smell the bitter leaf soup from lunch. I have bought goat meat. I have bought rice. I have hired 20 staff. And now you say there is no wedding. To her left, the band leader, a thin man whose shirt was 3 buttons too optimistic, waved a contract like it was on fire. We cancelled another wedding for this one. The deposit was non-refundable. Non. Re. Fun. De. Blee. Behind them, decorators were still setting up. White and gold fabric billowed in the breeze. Fairy lights dangled from poles that shouldn't exist. A massive arch of flowers, real flowers, expensive flowers, stood at the entrance like a beautiful, mocking monument to Mom Ngozi's stupidity. And there, at the center of the palace steps, sat the Oba. His face had gone past red, past purple, and settled somewhere in the neighborhood of eggplant. The coral beads around his neck trembled with each breath. His white agbada, meant for celebration, now looked like a judge's robe at an execution. Next to him, Prince Adeyemi looked like a man who'd been told his life was a comedy show and he was the punchline. His eyes, usually calm, intelligent, the eyes of a bank manager who'd seen it all, were wide with the kind of shock that comes from watching your existence implode in real time. Mom Ngozi. The Oba's voice was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that comes before thunder. But she couldn't answer. Because her husband, her dear, patient, long-suffering husband, was sitting on a bench nearby with a notepad, his lips moving in silent calculation. She knew what he was calculating: their house, her stall, his motorcycle, her jewelry, their children's school fees fund. The math wasn't mateing. We flew from London. A woman's voice, sharp with jet lag and rage, cut through everything else. London. Do you know how much that ticket cost? Do you? Mom Ngozi did not know. But she suspected she was about to find out. More voices joined the symphony of her destruction. The makeup artist is asking for her deposit back. The photographer has already posted on Instagram. My asoebi is fitted. What am I supposed to do with fitted asoebi for a wedding that doesn't exist? Where is the bride? Where is the bride? The Oba stood. Slowly. Deliberately. Every inch he rose, Mom Ngozi's knees weakened proportionally. You. He pointed at her with the kind of precision usually reserved for prophets calling down judgment. My office. Now. The crowd parted. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Tomorrow was Saturday. The wedding was scheduled for 2 p.m. The guests had traveled. The food was purchased. The band was contracted. The decorations were up. There was just one tiny, insignificant, absolutely catastrophic problem. There was no bride. How did a simple lie about groundnuts and zobo at the market turn into this? Well, it started 3 weeks ago, when Mom Ngozi made the mistake every gossip eventually makes. She thought she could control the story. She thought a small lie was like a small fire, easy to manage, easy to contain. But if you've ever seen a small lie explode into a full-blown disaster, if you've ever watched a harmless joke turn into a career-ending scandal, if you've ever said it's just a little exaggeration and watched it destroy your life, then you know exactly how this feels. And trust me, you want to see how deep this hole goes. Smash that subscribe button because this story gets wild. 3 weeks earlier. The problem with Monday mornings is that nothing happens on Sundays. Church people are too holy to misbehave. Mosque people are too pious to gossip. Even the notorious drinkers at Baba Sola's beer parlor take Sundays off to pretend they have home training. And without fresh gist, customers don't linger at Mom Ngozi's stall. No lingering means no sales. This was the equation that governed her life at Oja Market in Ayatoro Village, Oyo State, where she had sold groundnuts and zobo for the past 15 years. The morning sun had barely cleared the palm trees, but the market was already awake and argumentative. Hawkers shouted their wares in a violent symphony of commerce: fresh tomato, ripe tomato, yam, big tuber yam, ponmo, soft ponmo like butter. Generators hummed and coughed diesel fumes into air already thick with the smell of akra frying, palm oil heating, and yesterday's fish that someone definitely should have thrown away but was trying to sell anyway. Mama Ngozi sat behind her stall, a wooden table that leaned slightly to the left despite the rocks under one leg. Her groundnuts were arranged in perfect pyramids, a skill she'd mastered after years of practice. Her zobo, that deep red hibiscus drink, sat in jerry cans with plastic cups stacked beside them. But her real inventory wasn't visible. At 45 years old, with her ankara wrapper tied high on her waist and her head tie perpetually tilted to one side like a question mark, Mama Ngozi was known for two things: good zobo and better gist. Her stall was the CNN of Ayatoro, the BBC of the marketplace. If it happened in the village, or even in the neighboring villages, it passed through Mama Ngozi's lips before the day ended. Marriage proposals, secret affairs, business failures, mysterious illnesses, suspicious wealth, family drama, she knew it all, reported it all, and added just enough spice to keep it interesting. She was dramatic in the way only a woman who'd survived 15 years of market competition could be. When she told a story, her hands moved like she was conducting an orchestra. Her eyes widened at shocking parts. Her voice dropped to a whisper for secrets, then rose to a shout for the climax. People said she should have been an actress. She said she was, every customer was an audience. But this Monday morning, her stage was empty. Aya Tund had walked past with only a brief nod. Alhaji Musa bought his morning groundnuts without his usual 20-minute chat. Even Bizi the gossip queen, her only real competitor, was sitting at her stall looking equally bored. Mama Ngozi sighed and fanned herself with an old newspaper. The headline read, "Governor promises new roads." She'd believe it when she saw it. Politicians and promises were like her husband and housework, theoretically connected, rarely united. Then, like rain in the dry season, salvation appeared. Two women approached the fabric seller's stall directly across from hers. She recognized them, sisters from the Pentecostal church on the hill. The kind who said God forbid to everything but still knew everybody's business. Their voices carried across the narrow market corridor. "But are you sure it was him?" the younger one asked. "I'm telling you. My own eyes saw him at the filling station yesterday," the older sister replied. "Prince Adeyemi. Talking to a girl. A fine girl SEF. Light skin, long weave." Mama Ngozi's ears perked up like a dog hearing a can opener. Maybe it's his cousin? Which cousin? The way he was smiling? That's not cousin smile. That's something else. They paid for their fabric and moved on, their gossip fading with them. Mama Ngozi sat very still. Prince Adeyemi, the Oba's only son. 28 years old, worked at a bank in Ibadan, visited home on weekends. Quiet. Educated. Every mother's dream son-in-law. Unmarried. Talking to a girl at a filling station. That was it. That was the whole story. A man. A girl. A conversation. Probably about fuel prices or the weather. Mama Ngozi picked up a groundnut and cracked it thoughtfully. This gist was too dry. It needed seasoning. Her first customer of the day would be arriving soon, probably Aya Tund making her second round. And Aya Tund loved a good story almost as much as she loved her morning zobo. A slow smile spread across Mama Ngozi's face. She didn't plan to start a war. She just wanted to sell more zobo. Minutes later, like clockwork, Aya Tund appeared. She was a woman who moved through the market with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she wanted and exactly how much she was willing to pay for it. 40-something, perpetually wrapped in ankara that somehow always matched her mood, she had been buying groundnuts from Mama Ngozi for over a decade. But more importantly, she loved gist almost as much as she loved her morning zobo. Mama Ngozi. Good morning, oh. Aya Tund's voice carried the particular cheerfulness of someone who'd survived Monday morning household chaos and escaped to the market. Ah, Aya Tund. My special customer. Mom Ngozi's face lit up like Christmas lights. How is your husband? The children? They're well, thank God. Just give me the usual, 50 naira groundnuts. You know how that man likes to eat groundnuts and watch football like he's the one playing. Mom Ngozi measured out the groundnuts with a practiced efficiency of 15 years, but her mind was already 3 steps ahead. She arranged them carefully in the old newspaper, taking her time, building the moment. Then, as casually as discussing the weather, she leaned forward. Ayatund. Her voice dropped just slightly. Just enough. You didn't hear? Ayatund's hand paused halfway to her purse. Her eyes sharpened with interest. Hear what? Mom Ngozi glanced left, then right, as if checking for eavesdroppers. This was the art form. The craft. Anyone could spread gossip, but making someone feel like they were receiving classified information? That required skill. She leaned in closer. Ayatund leaned in too. Prince Adeyemi, Mom Ngozi whispered, is getting married. Ayatund's eyes went wide. Prince Adeyemi? Our Prince Adeyemi. Mom Ngozi nodded vigorously, warming to her creation like a sculptor seeing her masterpiece take shape. The Oba has finally chosen a bride for him. Very fine girl. From Lagos. Wealthy family, I'm talking serious money. Her father owns hotels. 3 hotels, I heard. Hotels. Ayatund's hand went to her chest. Yes so. And the girl herself, sharp like razor. A lawyer. Graduated from abroad SEF. The details were flowing now, smooth as her zobo. The wedding is next month. They're planning something big. Very big. Ayatund blinked rapidly, processing this information like a computer downloading files. But are you sure? Prince Adeyemi? He never even brings girls home. This was the critical moment. The point where belief could tip either way. Mom Ngozi straightened slightly, adjusted her wrapper, and deployed her secret weapon, righteous indignation mixed with Nigerian guilt trip. Would I lie to you? Her voice carried just the right amount of hurt. Me, Mom Ngozi? Ayatund, we are not close like that? Have I ever given you false information before? No, Mama. I didn't mean. I heard it from someone very close to the palace, Mom Ngozi continued, her voice now back to conspiratorial whisper. Very close. They told me in confidence, but you know I can't keep good news to myself. And this is good news. Our prince is finally settling down. That someone very close to the palace was, of course, entirely fictional. But it sounded credible. Official. The kind of source you couldn't question without seeming suspicious yourself. Ayatund was hooked. Completely. What's the girl's name? Mom Ngozi's brain scrambled for a second. Chidinma, she said, pulling the name from absolutely nowhere. Chidinma Okafor. Beautiful name, beautiful girl. And the wedding is next month? Which date exactly? They're still finalizing, you know how these big weddings are. But definitely next month. They want to do it before the rains fully start. Mom Ngozi was impressed with herself. That was a nice touch, practical reasoning always made lies more believable. Eya. This is wonderful news. Ayatund's face glowed with genuine happiness. The Oba must be so pleased. And our prince deserves a good wife. He's such a responsible young man. Exactly what I said. Mom Ngozi agreed enthusiastically, now fully committed to her fiction. That's why they chose someone with proper home training. Not these Instagram girls that are just looking for money. Ayatund nodded with the wisdom of the ages. True talk. A lawyer from a good family. That's what a prince needs. She reached for her purse again, and Mom Ngozi watched in satisfaction as she pulled out double the usual amount. Give me 100 naira groundnuts today. And 2 cups of zobo. This news has put me in good spirits. For the next 20 minutes, Ayatund stayed at the stall, asking questions Mom Ngozi answered with increasing creativity. What would the bride wear? Traditional attire, very expensive lace. How did they meet? Through family connections, of course. Was the bride Yoruba? No, but she speaks it fluently, cultured girl. Each lie built on the last, creating a tower of fiction so elaborate that Mom Ngozi almost believed it herself. As Ayatun finally walked away, practically floating with excitement, Mom Ngozi felt that deep satisfaction that comes from a job well done. Customer engagement, achieved. Sales, doubled. Entertainment value, priceless. And she wasn't done. 3 more customers who'd been hovering nearby, pretending to examine tomatoes but clearly listening, immediately approached. Mom Ngozi, is it true? The prince is getting married. By the time the church bells rang for noon, Mom Ngozi had sold more zobo than she typically sold in 3 days. Her groundnuts were flying off the table. And with each transaction, she polished the story a little more, added a detail here, clarified a point there. Is it really a lie if it could be true? She thought to herself as she counted her money. The prince is 28 years old. Marriage age. Somebody has to marry him eventually. I'm just predicting the future. Being proactive. Helping the universe along. Besides, what was the harm? People were happy. She was making sales. Everyone won. What Mom Ngozi didn't know, couldn't have known, was that her prediction was already spreading through Ayatoro like harmattan fire through dry grass. By lunchtime, her innocent prediction had reached 47 people. By evening, the entire village. And like that game of telephone you played as a child, each person added their own spice, their own interpretation, their own facts they'd heard from reliable sources. The lie had stopped being hers. It had taken on a life of its own. By Tuesday morning, Mom Ngozi's small lie had mutated into something she barely recognized. At the Mount Zion Pentecostal Church, the Women's Fellowship meeting had turned into an impromptu celebration. Sister Bimp, a woman whose testimony time was legendary for its length and dramatic flair, stood before 30 women packed into the church hall. Sisters. Sisters. She raised her hands like Moses parting the Red Sea. God is doing wonders in our village. Even our beloved Prince Adeyemi has found love. Hallelujah, the women chorused. I heard, Sister Bimp continued, her voice dropping to that special church whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room, that the bride is a doctor. From London. London, my sisters. Mama Comfort, sitting in the front row, gasped. A doctor? I heard she was a lawyer. Maybe she's both. Sister Bimp said with the confidence of someone who'd never let facts ruin a good testimony. These overseas children, they collect degrees like we collect wrappers. And the best part, she paused for effect, the girl is a born-again believer. Fire for fire. Hallelujah. Praise God. Within minutes, they'd created a WhatsApp group, Royal Wedding Prayer Warriors, Prince Adeyemi and his bride. By lunch, it had 43 members. They were already scheduling fasting and prayer sessions for the couple's fruitful marriage. Across the village, at the central mosque, a different version was taking shape. After Jumu'ah prayers, as men filed out into the afternoon sun, Alhaji Musa, respected elder and friend of the Oba's late father, pulled aside Malam Ibrahim. Ah, Ibrahim. Have you heard the good news about the Oba's son? Which news, Alhaji? He's getting married. Finally. The Oba has arranged everything. The bride is from a very respectable Muslim family in Abuja. Daughter of a businessman, hotels, I think. Or was it real estate? Alhaji Musa waved his hand dismissively. Details were negotiable. The important thing is, she's well brought up. Educated. The kind of wife a future leader needs. Malam Ibrahim stroked his beard thoughtfully. This is good. Very good. The young man needs to settle down. When is the wedding? Next month, they say. Big ceremony. They'll need to serve proper food, none of this small chops business. Do you still know that caterer from Ilorine? The one who made jollof rice that tasted like heaven was catering. Ah yes. Alhaja Silafat. Her rice is legendary. For the next 30 minutes, they debated catering options with the seriousness of military strategists planning an invasion. At Baba Sola's beer parlor, a collection of plastic chairs and tables under a zinc roof that had seen better decades. The evening crowd was in full session. "I'm telling you," Connell said, slamming his bottle of Star on the table for emphasis, "Davido is performing at the wedding." "Davido?" Tun scoffed, halfway through his Goldoy. "Please, shift. The Oba has class. It's Burna Boy. African giant himself." "You people are not serious," Emeka joined in. "Why would international artists come to Ayatoro for wedding? Let's be realistic, it's probably King Sunny Ade or one of those Fuji musicians." "Fuji?" Connell looked offended. "For a young prince? It's Afrobeats or nothing. I heard they're paying 20 million for the performance alone." 20 million? Where did you hear that? "My wife's cousin's friend works at the palace. She knows things." They argued for 45 minutes, each man's version becoming more elaborate. By the time they stumbled home that night, they'd collectively decided the wedding would feature Wizkid, Davido, and Burna Boy, with Tiwa Savage opening. The prince's supposed taste in women received unanimous approval, though none of them had ever seen or could describe the bride. In the digital realm, the lie spread even faster. The Ayatoro Landlords Association WhatsApp group lit up. "Landlord James, serious matter. The royal wedding is next month. We need to discuss parking arrangements for guests. Landlord Sarah, and security. Important people will be coming. I heard even the governor might attend. Landlord John, my wife wants to know about Aso-ebi. Has anyone heard the colors?" The Old Students Connect group, alumni of Ayatoro Community Secondary School, was already planning. "Adebayo, we should contribute for Aso-ebi as old students. Show support to the royal family." Folake, agreed. "Let's do N5,000 per person. That should cover good fabric." "Chidi, I'm in Lagos but I'll send money. We have to represent." Even the Village Prayer Warriors, a group that took intercessory prayer very seriously, was praying for the couple's fruitful marriage, financial prosperity, and at least 4 children, 2 boys, 2 girls, as Sister Bimp had very specifically requested from God. The telephone effect was in full bloom. Original, Prince Adeyemi was seen talking to a girl. Version 2, Prince Adeyemi is getting married. Version 3, bride from Lagos, wealthy family. Version 4, bride is a doctor/lawyer, depending on who was telling it. Version 5, international wedding, celebrity performers, the governor is invited. Version 6, the bride's father is a senator who owns half of Lagos. Each retelling added details, clarified facts, filled in blanks with imagination and hope and the particular kind of creativity that comes from wanting to be the person with the most information. Back at the market, Mom Ngozi was experiencing something new, anxiety. Mom Ngozi. A customer she barely knew rushed up to her stall. "Is it true the bride's father is a senator?" Mom Ngozi blinked. I think, maybe, possibly. And they're having the wedding at Eco Hotel in Lagos?" "Eco Hotel? Where did that come from?" "Yes. With fountain displays and fireworks. My cousin in Lagos heard about it." Mom Ngozi's smile was frozen on her face. "Senator? Eco Hotel? Fireworks?" Her simple lie about a wedding next month had somehow teleported to Lagos and acquired pyrotechnics. "Mama, you were right. Another woman chimed in. "I heard the bride is not just a doctor, she's a heart surgeon. Operates on governors and everyone." Heart surgeon. Now the imaginary bride was performing cardiac surgery. And, the first woman added breathlessly, they met at a conference in Dubai. "Dubai, Mama. Like a Nollywood movie." Mom Ngozi nodded weakly. Dubai had apparently joined the story. That evening, as she packed up her stall, she heard 2 teenagers discussing it. "I saw on Twitter. The bride is flying in with her family on a private jet. And the wedding planner is the same one who did Dangote's daughter's wedding." Private jets. Dangote's wedding planner. Dubai. Mom Ngozi's small lie had grown into something monstrous, something she no longer controlled or even recognized. It was like watching your child grow up and become a stranger, except this child was made of pure fiction and was about to get her killed. She should have stopped there. Should have admitted the truth. Should have laughed it off, called it a misunderstanding, blamed it on market gossip. But Mom Ngozi had a PhD in gossip, which means she also had a PhD in something else: pride. To admit she'd lied would mean losing face. Losing credibility. Losing her position as the market's information hub. It would mean people would question every story she'd ever told, every piece of gist she'd ever shared. And Mom Ngozi couldn't have that. So instead, when people asked, she smiled mysteriously and said things like "you'll see" and "wait for the invitation" and "I can't reveal everything." Which, naturally, made people even more certain she had inside information. The lie had become too big to stop. And it was only Tuesday. By Wednesday morning, Mom Ngozi was trapped in a web of her own spinning. The questions came faster than she could count her money. Every customer wanted details. Specific details. The kind of details that required her to lie with increasing creativity. "Mom Ngozi, what color is the asoebi?" a young woman asked, leaning against her stall with the intensity of a journalist at a press conference. Mom Ngozi didn't hesitate. "Gold and burgundy. Very elegant combination. Royal colors." "And the invitation cards?" "Ah." Mom Ngozi arranged her face into knowing sophistication. "They're being printed in Lagos as we speak. Very expensive designer, the same one who did that big society wedding last year. You know the one." She didn't specify which one, letting people fill in their own references. "How many guests?" "Only 500. Very exclusive. You know how these royal weddings are, they have to be selective. Can't just invite everybody." This was brilliant, she thought. By making it exclusive, she'd explained why most people wouldn't receive invitations. Problem solved before it became a problem. Another customer pushed forward. "Where exactly is the wedding taking place?" Mom Ngozi's brain scrambled. "The palace, of course. Where else would a prince get married? They're bringing in special decorators from Abuja. Tents, lights, the whole thing." Each lie required another lie to support it. It was like building a house with cards, every addition made the structure more impressive but more fragile. "And the bride's dress?" "Custom-made. From a designer in South Africa. Or was it Ghana? One of those places. Very expensive lace." She was painting herself into a corner, but what choice did she have? To admit the truth now would be social suicide. Better to keep building, keep adding, keep the story alive. That evening, in the small 2-bedroom house she shared with her husband and 2 children, reality attempted an intervention. Mom Ngozi was in the kitchen, frying plantain for dinner, when her husband, Bob Ngozi, a quiet man who drove an Okada for a living, appeared in the doorway. His face carried that particular expression of a man who'd been hearing things. "Woman." The single word made Mom Ngozi's hand pause over the frying pan. "I'm hearing things," he continued, leaning against the doorframe. "About the prince's wedding. Interesting things. Detailed things. Things that sound suspiciously like the kind of stories you tell at that market stall of yours." Mom Ngozi focused intensely on her plantains. "Plantain is ready. Call the children." "Ngozi." She hated when he used her actual name instead of Mom Ngozi. It meant he was serious. "You wouldn't know anything about this wedding story, would you?" "Why would I know?" She flipped the plantains with unnecessary aggression. "Am I the Oba's wife? Am I the prince's mother? Do I work at the palace?" That carried 30 years of marriage and intimate knowledge of her tendencies. It was the sound of a man who knew exactly what his wife was capable of but was too tired to fight about it. "I'm just saying," he continued, "if you started something, maybe now is the time to end it. Before it ends badly." "There's nothing to end. People talk. People gossip. Am I responsible for what the whole village says?" He looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head and walked away. Alone in the kitchen, Mom Ngozi stared at the frying plantains and conducted a mental negotiation with her conscience. What's the worst that could happen? So people believe something that's not true. So what? This is Nigeria. We believe bigger lies every day. Politicians promise roads that never come. Pastors promise miracles that never happen. At least her lie wasn't hurting anyone. It was harmless. Entertainment, really. The prince will get married someday, she reasoned. Everybody gets married eventually. I'm just early. Ahead of the curve. A prophet of future events. The plantain sizzled in the pan, and Mom Ngozi convinced herself, fully, completely, that everything would be fine. She was wrong. Very, very wrong. Because on Wednesday morning, while she was building her tower of lies, reality came knocking at the palace doors. Actually, reality didn't knock. Reality kicked down the door. The Oba of Ayatoro was a man who took his position with the gravity it deserved. At 63 years old, with coral beads that had belonged to his grandfather and a presence that could silence a room without words, he understood that being a traditional ruler meant more than wearing royal attire. It meant dignity. Responsibility. Being the bridge between the village's past and its future. Wednesday morning found him in his private receiving room at the palace, a space decorated with photographs of previous obas, ceremonial items, and furniture that had been gifted by various governors over the decades. He was reviewing some land dispute documents when his aide announced, "Kabiyesi, the Bail of Igbora is here to pay his respects." The Oba nodded. Courtesy visits between traditional rulers were common. He adjusted his agbada and prepared for the usual exchange of pleasantries. The Bail entered, a rotund man with a walking stick that was more decoration than necessity, wearing flowing white agbada and a red cap that signified his position. After the traditional greetings and prostrations, they settled into conversation. The Bail's face was lit with genuine warmth. "Kabiyesi, I came personally to congratulate you on your son's wedding." The Oba smiled politely. "Which wedding?" The Bail laughed, that knowing laugh of someone who thinks you're being modest. "Ah, Kabiyesi, don't be like that. The whole local government is talking about it. Your son, Prince Adeyemi, and his bride. What wonderful news." The Oba's smile remained fixed, but something shifted behind his eyes. "Tell me what you've heard." "Well." The Bail settled in, clearly delighted to share. "They say the bride is a doctor, or was it a lawyer, from a very prominent family. Lagos people, I heard. Or was it Abuja? Either way, wealthy. Educated. The wedding is next month, they say. Very big ceremony planned." The Oba's face revealed nothing. Years of political experience had taught him the art of the poker face. He nodded. Asked appropriate questions. Laughed at appropriate moments. But inside, a storm was brewing. After 20 minutes of pleasant conversation about the upcoming wedding, about which the Oba knew absolutely nothing, the Bail finally departed, leaving behind blessings and promises to send a proper delegation for the ceremony. The exact moment, the Bail's car pulled away from the palace grounds, the Oba's composure cracked. "Adeyemi." His voice carried through the palace with such force that even the security guards outside jumped. His aide appeared, trembling slightly. "Kabiyesi. Get my son on the phone. Now." 90 kilometers away in Ibadan, Prince Adeyemi was having the kind of Wednesday morning that bank managers pray for, quiet, productive, and blessedly drama-free. He was in the middle of reviewing audit documents, his desk organized with the precision of someone who genuinely enjoyed spreadsheets, when his phone began vibrating. Dad flashed on the screen. He let it ring twice before answering, a small assertion of professional boundaries. "Good morning, Daddy. I'm actually in a meeting right now. Can I call you back in?" "Come home. Now." The line went dead. Prince Adeyemi stared at his phone. His father wasn't a dramatic man. Didn't make unnecessary demands. If he said now, he meant now. He stood up, grabbed his car keys, and offered a hurried explanation to his confused colleagues. "Family emergency. I'll be back tomorrow." The drive from Ibadan to Ayatoro normally took 90 minutes. Prince Adeyemi made it in 75, his mind racing faster than his Toyota Camry. What could be wrong? His mother's health? She'd been fine when he called on Sunday. Money problems? The palace accounts were stable. Political issues? Conflict with another traditional ruler? He ran through every scenario, each more worrying than the last. But not once, Not even for a single moment during that frantic drive down pothole-riddled roads did he imagine the truth. He wasn't rushing home because of an emergency. He was rushing home because, according to the entire local government, several WhatsApp groups, his father's colleagues, and apparently the universe itself, he was engaged to a woman he'd never met. A woman whose name changed depending on who was telling the story. A woman who was, at this very moment, being described in various versions as a doctor, a lawyer, a heart surgeon, the daughter of a senator, and someone who'd met him in Dubai. Prince Adeyemi drove toward Ayatoro, blissfully unaware that his bachelor status had been terminated without his knowledge or consent, and that his life was about to become very, very complicated. The Oba was pacing when Prince Adeyemi arrived. This was a bad sign. A very bad sign. The Oba didn't pace. Pacing suggested loss of control, and the Oba was always in control. Daddy. Prince Adeyemi entered the private room cautiously, like someone approaching a potentially dangerous animal. What's wrong? Is everyone okay? The Oba stopped mid-pace and turned to face his son. His expression was difficult to read, somewhere between fury, confusion, and the exhausted patience of a man dealing with incomprehensible circumstances. Sit down. Prince Adeyemi sat. When the Oba began, his voice dangerously calm, were you planning to tell me about your wedding? Prince Adeyemi blinked. My what? Your wedding. Each word was delivered like a separate sentence. Daddy, I don't. The governor's wife called me this morning. The Oba's voice rose slightly. The governor's wife. Asking about color schemes for the Aso Ebi. Offering to help with contacts for catering. Congratulating me on finding such a wonderful bride for you. Prince Adeyemi felt like he'd entered an alternate dimension. What bride? That's what I want to know. The Oba's control slipped further. I've received 7 phone calls, 4 text messages, and 2 personal visits, including one from the Bale of Igbora, all congratulating me on your upcoming wedding next month. Next month. Prince Adeyemi stood up, his banker's brain trying to process this information logically and failing completely. Daddy, I don't have a girlfriend. I'm not dating anyone. I haven't even been on a date in 6 months because I've been working on that expansion project at the bank. Then who are you marrying? No one. They stared at each other, father and son, both equally confused but for different reasons. The Oba sat down heavily in his chair. Then where is this story coming from? What are people saying exactly? The Oba pulled out his phone. Yes, the traditional ruler had fully embraced technology, and began scrolling. According to various sources, you're marrying a doctor from London. Or a lawyer from Lagos. Or possibly both. Her father is either a senator or a hotel owner. You met in Dubai, or at a conference, or through family connections. The wedding is at the palace, or possibly at Eco Hotel. Davido is performing, or maybe Burna Boy, or possibly both plus Wizkid. With each addition, Prince Adeyemi's eyes grew wider. There are WhatsApp groups, the Oba continued, his voice taking on a slightly hysterical edge, praying for your marriage. Praying. For a marriage that doesn't exist. To a woman who doesn't exist. Prince Adeyemi collapsed back into his chair. This is insane. We need to find out where this started. The Oba was back in problem-solving mode. Stories this specific don't just appear from nowhere. He called his aide. Get the Bale of Igbora back on the phone. 10 minutes of phone tag later, they had traced the story backward like detectives following a trail of breadcrumbs. The Bale heard it from the Imam at the central mosque, who heard it from Al-Haji Musa, who heard it from a woman at the market, who heard it from her friend Ayatund, who heard it from the zobo seller at Oja Market, the aide reported. A woman named Ngozi. Prince Adeyemi's jaw dropped. Ngozi? The groundnut woman. He knew her. Everyone in Ayatoro knew Ngozi. She'd been selling at that market since he was a child. His mother bought groundnuts from her. She made excellent zobo. And she was legendary, absolutely legendary, for gossip. That woman, the Oba said slowly, his voice carrying the weight of dawning realization and rising fury, has told the entire local government that you're getting married. But why? I barely know her. I buy groundnuts sometimes when I visit, but bring her to me, the Oba told his aide. Now, in most stories, this is where the guilty party runs away. Hides. Denies everything. Flees to another village to start a new life under an assumed name. But Mama Ngozi was not most people. When the palace guard arrived at her stall that Wednesday afternoon, a tall man in traditional palace uniform that meant serious official business, Mama Ngozi had two choices. Choice A, confess. Admit she'd made up the story. Beg for forgiveness. Face public humiliation but potentially escape with her life and property intact. Choice B, commit. Double down on the lies. Maintain innocence. Hope that somehow, miraculously, the situation would resolve itself. Mama Ngozi, bless her stubborn, prideful, spectacularly misguided heart, chose option C. Panic. Pure, undiluted, all-consuming panic. The market went silent. Not the comfortable silence of early morning before the day begins, but the heavy, suffocating silence that falls when something serious, something potentially catastrophic, is happening. The palace guard stood at Mama Ngozi's stall like a messenger of doom in traditional uniform. His voice carried across the market corridor with official gravity. Mama Ngozi, the Oba requests your presence at the palace. Immediately. Every head within hearing distance swiveled toward her stall. Mama Ngozi felt her stomach drop through the ground and continue falling toward the center of the earth. The cup of zobo she'd been holding slipped from her fingers, splashing red across the dusty ground like a bad omen. Ah! Mama, what did you do? Bizi the fabric seller hissed from across the way. Aya Tund, who'd started this whole mess by being Mama Ngozi's first audience, appeared from nowhere, her face a mixture of concern and the kind of excitement that comes from watching someone else's drama unfold. Mama Ngozi, you need to go. When the Oba calls, you don't delay. Mama Ngozi stood on shaking legs. Her mouth had gone completely dry. I need to close my stall. Leave it, the guard said firmly. Now. The walk from Oja Market to the palace took 10 minutes under normal circumstances. This was not normal circumstances. Every step felt like walking toward execution. Mama Ngozi's wrapper, the same one she'd tied confidently that morning, now felt too tight, constricting her breathing. Her head tie, usually crooked in her signature style, seemed to be squeezing her skull. The guard walked ahead, setting a brisk pace. She followed, her mind racing through excuses faster than her legs were carrying her forward. Maybe I can say I was joking? No one jokes about royal weddings. Maybe I can say someone else told me first? But who? I'd need a name. Maybe I can say I was possessed? Temporary insanity? Heat stroke? Villagers stopped to watch her pass. She saw them whispering, pointing. Word spread faster than she could walk. By the time she reached the palace gates, half of Ayatoro knew that Mama Ngozi had been summoned by the Oba. The other half would know within the hour. Her legs felt like jelly. Her heart was beating so fast she wondered if this was what a heart attack felt like. She briefly considered fainting, at least unconscious people couldn't be interrogated, but her body refused to cooperate even with that escape plan. The palace loomed before her, its walls suddenly looking more like prison walls than the familiar landmark she'd passed 1,000 times. Inside the Oba's private receiving room, Mama Ngozi performed the traditional protocol with trembling limbs. She prostrated fully, forehead touching the cool tile floor. Kabiyesi. Oba Nla. Kabiyesi-o. Rise. She rose, but barely. Her knees seemed to have forgotten their primary function. The Oba sat in his ceremonial chair, his face unreadable. Prince Adeyemi stood beside him, arms crossed, looking like a man who'd been told his house was on fire and he was somehow responsible for the arson. Mama Ngozi. The Oba's voice was dangerously calm, the kind of calm that comes before hurricanes. Sit down. She sat on the very edge of the offered chair, her body language screaming readiness to bolt for the door at the first opportunity. Her hands twisted in her wrapper, wringing the fabric like she was trying to squeeze water from stone. Tell me, the Oba continued, his eyes never leaving her face, about my son's wedding. Mama Ngozi's mouth opened and closed several times before sound emerged. Ah. Kabiyesi. I heard, there was talk. From who? Her brain scrambled. From someone. Someone has a name. The Oba leaned forward slightly, and Mom Ngozi felt like prey being observed by a predator deciding whether to pounce or toy with its catch first. Kabiyesi, I. The word stuck in her throat like dry gari. I might have, possibly, shared some information. Shared. The Oba repeated the word like he was tasting something bitter. Is that what we're calling it? Mom Ngozi tried to explain, words tumbling out in panic desperation. Kabiyesi, it was just small talk. Market gist. You know how it is, people talk, I talk, everyone talks. I didn't mean anything by it. I was just trying to make conversation, to sell my zobo, and the story it just grew. I didn't tell them to take it seriously. I'm just a groundnut seller. How was I supposed to know? Do you know, the Oba interrupted, his voice cutting through her babbling like a knife through soft butter, what you have done? He picked up his phone, a smartphone that looked almost comically modern in his traditional clad hands, and began scrolling. 47 missed calls, he said, showing her the screen. From traditional rulers. Government officials. Business associates. Family friends. He swiped to another app. 7 WhatsApp groups discussing the wedding. 7. With a combined membership of over 300 people. Mom Ngozi felt her vision starting to blur at the edges. Here, the Oba continued, his voice rising slightly, is an email from the governor's office. The governor's office. Requesting an official invitation and asking about security arrangements. Kabiyesi, I'm not finished. He swiped again. The local newspaper has contacted my aide asking for an exclusive interview about the royal wedding. Someone has started a hashtag on Twitter, #Ayatoro Royal Wedding. It has 237 posts. Mom Ngozi's soul was definitely trying to leave her body now. Twitter? The newspaper? Prince Adeyemi finally spoke, his voice tight with frustration. I've been getting congratulatory texts all day. My colleagues at the bank think I'm rude for not inviting them. My boss asked if I needed time off for the ceremony. He ran his hand over his face. My own mother, who lives in this village, who I see every weekend, called me asking why she wasn't consulted about choosing my bride. But Kabiyesi. Mom Ngozi found her voice, desperate now. I didn't ask them to do all that. I didn't tell people to book hotels. I didn't tell them to plan travel. I didn't. You lit the match, the Oba said quietly. They built the bonfire. But who handed them the fuel? Silence fell like a heavy blanket. The Oba stood and began pacing, that same dangerous pacing from earlier. Do you understand my position? If I publicly deny this wedding, I lose face. The entire local government thinks my son is getting married. If I say it was all a lie, I look foolish. The palace looks foolish. Our dignity is compromised. But if I confirm it, he continued, his voice heavy with the weight of impossible choices, I'm lying to everyone. To the governor. To my fellow traditional rulers. To my own people. He stopped pacing and turned to face her directly. I can't punish you too harshly, you're just a market woman who made a mistake. But I can't let this pass without consequence. People have spent money. Made plans. Committed resources. He picked up a notebook from his desk and began reading. Caterers have purchased food. Decorators have been contracted. A band has been hired. People have bought fabric for Aso Ebi. One woman, he looked up, his expression incredulous, flew in from London. London, Mom Ngozi. Someone spent over £1 million naira on international travel because of your small talk. Mom Ngozi felt tears pricking her eyes. Real tears, not the crocodile tears she sometimes deployed to win arguments at the market. Kabiyesi, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything. I'll apologize publicly. I'll pay. She stopped, realizing the impossibility of that promise. The Oba returned to his chair and sat heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 63 years. Mom Ngozi waited for judgment. A fine? She'd find a way to pay it. Community service? She'd sweep the palace grounds for a year. Public apology? Humiliating, but survivable. She waited, her hands still twisting in her wrapper, her heart hammering against her ribs like it was trying to escape the situation her mouth had created. The Oba looked at her. Then at his son. Then back at her. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but filled with terrible certainty. You started this wedding. You will finish it. Mom Ngozi's brain struggled to process the words. Finish it? Finish what? How do you finish a wedding that doesn't exist? And then, as understanding dawned like a terrible sunrise, she realized what he meant. What the Oba said next made her wish, fervently, desperately, with every fiber of her being, that she'd been struck mute at birth. You will find my son a bride. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Mom Ngozi blinked. I will, what? Find. My son. A bride. The Oba spoke slowly, as if explaining something to a particularly slow child. By Saturday. Saturday. Today was Wednesday. Saturday was. Mom Ngozi's brain struggled with the math. 3 days away. 3 days. The words exploded from her mouth before she could stop them. You told the entire village the wedding is next month, the Oba continued, his voice taking on the tone of someone explaining the logical consequences of illogical actions. We'll move it up. This Saturday. Traditional ceremony. That gives us enough time to salvage dignity and satisfy the guests who've already made plans. But Kabiyesi. The bride must be willing, the Oba continued, counting on his fingers. Respectable. Acceptable to this family. Someone my son can actually stand to be in the same room with. Prince Adeyemi made a strangled sound. Daddy, this is crazy. You want to marry someone you choose? The Oba turned to his son, his voice sharp. Fine. Choose. You have until Saturday. I need time. You can't rush marriage. There's compatibility, getting to know someone, making sure. Mom Ngozi has 3 days to fix this, the Oba interrupted. You have 3 days. Either you choose, or she chooses for you. He turned back to Mom Ngozi. If you fail. He pulled out the notebook again and began reading figures that made Mom Ngozi's heart stop. Caterers have purchased ingredients and hired staff. Total cost, 500,000 naira. They require full payment. Mom Ngozi's hands went cold. Decorators have already begun work and ordering materials. 300,000 naira. The room was spinning. A band was contracted, cancelling another booking. 200,000 naira, non-refundable. She couldn't breathe. Aso-ebi fabric purchased by various families, approximately 150,000 naira total. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. The cousin from London, the Oba's voice took on a particularly stern note, spent £800 on flights. At today's exchange rate, that's 1,200,000 naira. Mom Ngozi's vision was actually darkening at the edges now. Plus hotel bookings, gifts already purchased, transportation arrangements, and various other expenses. The Oba looked up from his notebook. Conservative estimate, 3 million naira. Possibly more. 3 million naira. Mom Ngozi owned a market stall worth maybe 200,000 if she was lucky. Her house, still not fully paid for, might fetch 1 million if she could find a desperate buyer. Her life savings, 87,000 naira. Her husband's motorcycle, another 150,000. Even if she sold everything they owned, every possession, every asset, every item of value, she might scrape together 1.5 million naira. She'd still be 1.5 million naira short. I don't have that kind of money, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Kabiyesi, even if I sold everything, my house, my stall, everything. I don't have it. Then I suggest, the Oba said with finality, you find a bride. Prince Adeyemi threw his hands up. This is insane. You're going to force me to marry a stranger because of her lie. I'm giving you both 3 days to fix a problem you both have stake in, the Oba corrected. She created it. You're the subject of it. Saturday, there will be a ceremony. Either with a real bride, or Mom Ngozi will begin payment plans that will take her the rest of her natural life to complete. He stood, signaling the meeting was over. 3 days, Mom Ngozi. I suggest you start searching. And so began the most desperate bride hunt in Ayatoro history. Think The Bachelor, but with higher stakes, a much shorter timeline, and significantly more panic. Mom Ngozi walked out of the palace feeling like she'd aged 20 years in 30 minutes. Her legs carried her automatically back toward the market, but her mind was elsewhere, spinning through impossible calculations. Find a bride. In 3 days. For a prince who didn't want to get married. To save herself from debt that would destroy her family for generations. How exactly does one accomplish such a task? She was about to find out. Mom Ngozi didn't go home after leaving the palace. She went hunting. Her first stop was the primary school, where she found Blessing marking exercise books in the staff room. At 26, Blessing was everything a mother-in-law could want, pretty in that natural, no-makeup needed way, intelligent, patient with children, and most importantly, single. Or so Mom Ngozi thought. Blessing. My dear. Mom Ngozi burst into the staff room with the energy of a woman on a mission. I have wonderful news for you. Blessing looked up from a stack of arithmetic books, surprised. Mom Ngozi? Is everything okay? Better than okay. How would you like to be a princess? Blessing blinked. What? Princess. Palace life. Respect from everyone. Never worrying about money again. Mom Ngozi was in full sales mode, the same energy she used to convince customers that day-old Accra was still fresh. Prince Adeyemi needs a wife, and I immediately thought of you, educated, beautiful, good character. Mama, that sounds wonderful, but, Blessing held up her left hand, where a modest but unmistakable engagement ring caught the fluorescent light. I just got engaged last week. To Kunal. We're planning the wedding for December. Mom Ngozi stared at the ring like it was a personal betrayal. Can you postpone? Postpone my engagement? Just for a little while. You could marry the prince first, and then, Mom Ngozi heard the words leaving her mouth and realized how insane they sounded. Or, maybe. No. Blessing's face was a mixture of confusion and concern. Mama, are you feeling well? Stop 2 was the village clinic, where Chioma was finishing her evening shift. 29, responsible, the kind of woman who actually used a planner and color-coded her schedule. Perfect princess material. Chioma. Just the person I wanted to see. Chioma looked up from organizing medical supplies, immediately wary. Mom Ngozi's enthusiastic voice usually meant trouble. Mom Ngozi. What can I do for you? The prince, Prince Adeyemi, is looking for a wife. Immediately. I know it's sudden, but he's a good man. Bank job, educated, respectable family. Mama, I'm moving to Canada on Friday. Mom Ngozi felt her hope deflate like a punctured tire. Friday? This Friday? 2 days from now Friday. Yes. My visa expires next week. Everything is packed. My flight is booked. Chioma's tone was apologetic but firm. I'm sorry, Mama. If I'd known earlier. Can you delay? Just 1 week? Just. My visa expires, Mama. I can't delay. Chioma touched her arm gently. Are you in some kind of trouble? Mom Ngozi couldn't even answer. She just turned and left, her wrapper feeling heavier with each step. Stop 3, Amanat's tailoring shop, where the smell of fabric and the sound of her sewing machine created an industrious atmosphere. At 27, Amanat had built a successful business from nothing. Beautiful, ambitious, independent. Princess. Mom Ngozi announced, startling Amanat mid-stitch. How would you like to be a princess? Amanat removed her foot from the sewing machine pedal. Mom Ngozi? Prince Adeyemi. You'd never lack customers as a princess. The royal connection alone would. But I don't even know him. Amanat's logical mind immediately identified the core problem. You can learn. Love grows. My own marriage was arranged and look how well. Mom Ngozi stopped herself before admitting that her husband was currently not speaking to her. Marriage is about partnership. Compatibility develops over time. Over time, yes. Over 3 days. Aminat stood up, her expression shifting from confused to suspicious. Mama, what is really happening here? Mom Ngozi fled before she could answer. Stop 4 was Funk, who worked at a bank in the neighboring town. 30 years old, successful, financially literate. Surely a woman who understood banking would appreciate a man in banking? You're both in banking. Mom Ngozi pitched with desperate enthusiasm when she found Funk at her family compound. Perfect match. Same industry, same understanding of financial matters. Funk's eyes narrowed. Why the rush? Why are you going around the village trying to marry off the prince like you're selling overripe tomatoes? Modern couples move fast. Young people today, they don't waste time like. Or, Funk interrupted, her banker's instinct for spotting bad deals kicking in. There's something wrong with him? Is he sick? Does he gamble? Secret children somewhere? No. Nothing like that. He's perfect. He just needs. But Funk was already walking back into her house, calling over her shoulder, whatever trouble you're in, Mama, leave me out of it. When did young girls become so choosy? Mom Ngozi trudged from house to house as the sun set over Ayatoro, her pitch becoming more desperate with each rejection. In her time, if the Oba's family proposed, you said yes. You didn't ask questions about compatibility or love or getting to know each other. Marriage was a contract, a partnership, a practical arrangement. None of this romance novel nonsense. But this wasn't her time. This was now, and now was proving very, very difficult. Candidate 5, already in a relationship she needed to think about. Candidate 6, studying for university entrance exams and not ready for marriage. Candidate 7, laughed in her face, thinking it was a joke. Candidate 8, said yes, got excited, then realized Mom Ngozi meant this Saturday and said, "Are you mad?" By nightfall, Mom Ngozi had approached 8 women. Success rate, 0. Her feet hurt from walking all over the village. Her pride, her legendary, unshakable pride, lay in pieces somewhere between stop 3 and stop 4. When she finally dragged herself home, her husband was sitting on their small veranda, pointedly reading a newspaper. He didn't look up when she approached. Didn't acknowledge her presence. Just kept reading, his silence more damning than any words could be. Inside their bedroom, she collapsed onto the bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling fan that had stopped working 2 months ago and they couldn't afford to fix. 3 million naira. 3 days. 0 brides. Day 1 was a complete disaster. But Mom Ngozi was a survivor. She'd sold groundnuts through economic recession, 3 government regimes, and that terrible flood of 2018 when the market was underwater for a week. She'd rebuilt her stall twice, survived countless competitors' attempts to steal her customers, and once argued down a tax collector so effectively he apologized to her. She wasn't giving up. On day 2, she would expand her search radius. Which, in retrospect, was a terrible idea. Thursday morning found Mom Ngozi on an Okada heading to Abeokuta, 30 minutes away, holding on to the motorcycle driver for dear life while her wrapper threatened to fly away with every bump in the road. If Ayatoro's eligible women weren't cooperating, she'd find women who didn't know the full story yet. The matchmaker in Abeokuta, Mama Sekinat, a woman whose entire business was connecting unmarried people, listened to Mom Ngozi's pitch with increasing skepticism. You need a bride, by Saturday? Yes. For Prince Adeyemi of Ayatoro. The Oba's son. Mama Sekinat's skepticism transformed into opportunism. A royal wedding? The commission alone would feed her family for months. Ah. I have someone. Perfect girl. Let me call her. Kemi arrived within the hour. 25, beautiful in that Instagram filter not needed way, wearing a dress that suggested she'd been preparing for this opportunity her entire life. A prince. Her eyes gleamed with dreams of palace life. I've always known I was meant for something special. Perfect. Come, let's go meet him. Mom Ngozi was already calculating, If this worked, she'd be saved by noon. They made the journey back to Ayatoro in Mama Sekanat's ancient Mercedes that smelled like incense and ambition. Mom Ngozi spent the entire ride coaching Kemi. Smile, but not too much. Be interested, but not desperate. Ask intelligent questions. Remember, you're interviewing him as much as he's. But when they arrived at the palace and found Prince Adeyemi in his father's study reviewing what looked like damage control documents, Kemi abandoned all coaching. So when do I move into the palace? She asked before even sitting down. Prince Adeyemi looked up, startled. I'm sorry, what? After the wedding. Saturday, right? I'll need to know which rooms are mine. And I want to redecorate. The palace is nice but a bit traditional. I'm thinking modern aesthetic, maybe some. We just met, Prince Adeyemi interrupted, his voice strained with the patience of a man who'd been ambushed 6 times already. Like, literally 30 seconds ago. Yes, but after the wedding. There's not going to be a wedding. Kemi's face transformed from dreamy to furious in seconds. You wasted my time. I came all the way from Abeokuta. I already told my friends I was marrying a prince. I posted on Instagram. She stormed out, her heels clicking angrily against the palace tiles. Mom Ngozi chased after her. Wait. Let me explain. There is a wedding, he just needs time to. But Kemi was already in the Mercedes, slamming the door. Mama Sekanat shot Mama Ngozi a look that promised their business relationship was over, and drove away. Village 2, Ogbomoso, 1 hour away. Tolani was 32, divorced with 2 children, and approached the meeting with the practicality of someone who'd learned that romance was optional but stability was essential. I need to know about his salary, she said, pulling out an actual notebook. Benefits package. Family medical history, any genetic conditions I should know about? What's the palace maintenance budget? Will I have my own kitchen or will I be expected to share with his mother? Prince Adeyemi stared at her. This isn't a job interview. Marriage is the most important contract you'll ever sign, Tolani replied, clicking her pen. I'm not making the same mistake twice. Now, about the kitchen. This isn't happening. Prince Adeyemi stood up. Mom Ngozi, I'm leaving. Tolani looked offended. I haven't even gotten to the questions about his retirement plan. The afternoon became a blur of awkward meetings. Candidate 3 from Isayin, 18 years old, just finished secondary school, giggled at everything Prince Adeyemi said and called him uncle. Candidate 4 from Oyo, turned out to be married with a husband who showed up mid-meeting demanding to know why his wife was being proposed to. Candidate 5 from Ibadan, only wanted to know about Instagram opportunities, palace Wi-Fi password, and whether she could do influencing as a princess. Candidate 6 from Arawa, asked if the palace had Wi-Fi before asking the prince's name, occupation, or literally anything about him as a person. After the 6th disaster, Prince Adeyemi finally snapped. They were standing in the palace courtyard, Mom Ngozi trying to schedule a 7th meeting, Prince Adeyemi looking like a mun on the edge of sanity. Stop. His voice cut through her planning. Just stop. But there's still one more girl from. I'm not marrying a stranger to save you from your lie. He was shouting now, something the usually composed banker never did. You did this. You fix it. But leave me out of it. He got into his car and drove away, tires throwing up dust, leaving Mom Ngozi standing alone in the courtyard. Around her, evidence of the approaching wedding mocked her failure. Decorators were setting up poles for the canopy, their hammering rhythmic and relentless. The band had arrived for sound check, she could hear them testing drums and keyboards. Somewhere, caterers were preparing food. Fabric sellers were finishing rush orders for Aso Ebi. Tomorrow was Friday. Day 3. The final day. Saturday was the wedding. And she had no bride. For the first time in 45 years, Mom Ngozi had no words. No excuse. No clever story to spin herself out of trouble. She'd talked herself into a hole so deep, even her legendary mouth couldn't dig her out. The sun was setting, painting the palace walls in shades of orange and red that looked uncomfortably like fire. She walked home in silence. Her husband was waiting on the veranda again, but this time he looked up. Took one look at her face, defeated, exhausted, desperate, and knew they were finished. Tomorrow, they'd start making lists of belongings to sell. The house. The stall. His motorcycle. Her jewelry. Everything. And it still wouldn't be enough. That night, Mom Ngozi lay in bed unable to sleep, listening to her husband's quiet breathing beside her and wondering how one small lie had destroyed her entire life. What she didn't know, couldn't have known, was that the solution was already out there. Watching her. Laughing at her desperate bride hunt. Observing the chaos with amused interest. And planning. Friday morning, Mom Ngozi returned to her market stall because what else could she do? She moved like a ghost through the familiar motions, arranging groundnuts that didn't need arranging, pouring zobo into cups nobody had asked for, wiping down a table that was already clean. Her hands knew the routine even when her mind had abandoned all hope. 20 naira groundnuts, please. She measured them out in silence, took the money, handed over the newspaper-wrapped package. No greeting. No story. No have you heard. The customer waited, clearly expecting more. When nothing came, she left, confused. This happened 3 more times before Ayatund, who'd inadvertently started this whole disaster, approached with genuine concern on her face. Mama, are you okay? Mom Ngozi just nodded. Speaking felt like too much effort. Words were what had gotten her into this mess. Maybe if she never spoke again, the universe would take pity on her. But the universe wasn't feeling particularly merciful. Around the market, whispers followed her like flies on spoiled meat. Everyone knew. Of course everyone knew. This was Ayatoro. Secrets lasted about as long as ice cream in July. That's her, she heard someone murmur. The one who made up the wedding story. See the gossip who became the gist. Some of the reactions were sympathetic. Market women who'd spent years exaggerating their own stories, who understood how a small lie could snowball, who'd been saved only by luck from similar disasters. They looked at Mom Ngozi with the relief of people who'd narrowly avoided stepping in the same trap. Others were less kind. Men who'd always said women talked too much shook their heads with "I told you so" satisfaction. This is why silence is golden, she heard one elder say to his friend. The mouth that talks too much digs its own grave. Children stopped playing to watch the famous gossip brought low, not quite understanding what was happening but sensing the dramatic shift in the market's social hierarchy. Through it all, Mom Ngozi sat in silence, a monument to the dangers of an uncontrolled tongue. Around 10 a.m., her husband arrived. He was carrying a notepad, the same one from the palace, and his face wore the expression of a man who'd spent all night doing impossible mathematics and found only impossible answers. I calculated everything, he said quietly, sitting beside her. No anger in his voice anymore. Just resignation. If we sell the house, we might get 1 million Nigerian nairas. Your stall, maybe 200,000 Nigerian nairas. My motorcycle, 150,000 Nigerian nairas. Your jewelry, the children's electronics, everything we own. He showed her the number written at the bottom of the page, 1.8 million Nigerian nairas. Below it, underlined twice, still short 1.2 million Nigerian nairas. Mom Ngozi stared at the numbers. Even selling everything, their home, their livelihood, every possession they'd accumulated in 30 years of marriage, wouldn't be enough. And for the first time since this whole disaster began, she broke. Actually broke. Tears, real tears, not the strategic kind she sometimes deployed to win arguments, rolled down her cheeks. Her shoulders shook. Her breath came in gasps. I just wanted to sell zobo, she whispered through her crying. That's all. Just sell zobo. Make people linger. How did it get to this? The market, which had been buzzing with gossip and schadenfreude, went quiet. There was something deeply unsettling about seeing Mom Ngozi cry. She was a constant in Ayatoro's social ecosystem, loud, dramatic, always with a story. Seeing her reduced to tears was like watching the sun rise in the west. Wrong. Unnatural. Some women's faces softened. Wallahi, all of us have exaggerated stories, one muttered to her neighbor. Could have been any of us. The men looked uncomfortable. Watching a woman cry in public made them want to be anywhere else. A small crowd had gathered, though most people pretended they weren't specifically watching the drama unfold. But one person was watching very deliberately. On the opposite side of the market, sitting at Beezy's fabric stall with a cup of zobo, pointedly not from Mom Ngozi's stall, a young woman had been observing the entire scene. She was maybe 27, dressed in a way that suggested someone who'd left the village, learned things, and come back with different perspectives. Jeans instead of wrapper. A professional blouse. Natural hair pulled into a neat bun. Glasses that made her look like she read books for fun. She'd been there for almost an hour, occasionally sipping her zobo, mostly watching Mom Ngozi with an expression that hovered between amusement and something else. Something calculating. In her hands, a small notebook. Every so often, she'd glance down and type something on her phone. When Mom Ngozi's husband showed her the devastating calculation, the young woman leaned forward slightly. When Mom Ngozi broke down crying, the young woman's smile grew. Not a cruel smile. More like someone watching a chess game and finally seeing their opportunity to move. She set down her zobo cup, closed her notebook, stood up, and began walking toward Mom Ngozi. The crowd sensed something happening, that particular shift in energy that comes before significant moments. People stepped aside without quite knowing why. The market, already quiet, became quieter still. The young woman moved with confidence, with purpose, her sandals making soft sounds against the packed earth of the market ground. She stopped directly in front of Mom Ngozi's stall. Mom Ngozi looked up through tear-blurred eyes at this stranger, this well-dressed, composed young woman who was looking at her with an expression that was part sympathy, part amusement, and part something Mom Ngozi couldn't quite identify. The young woman smiled. And said 6 words that changed everything. "So auntie, you need a bride?" The market held its breath. Mom Ngozi blinked away tears, trying to focus on the face in front of her. "What?" "A bride," the young woman repeated calmly, as if discussing the price of tomatoes. "For tomorrow's wedding. You need one, correct?" Who are you?" "My name is Folktale." She extended her hand in that modern way young people did, confident, businesslike. "I run a small tech startup here in the village. I teach coding to young people. Digital skills training." Mom Ngozi shook her hand automatically, her brain struggling to catch up. You want to marry the prince?" Folktale laughed, not unkindly, but genuinely amused. "God forbid. No offense to him, but I have plans that don't include royal marriage. But I can help you." "Help me?" Mom Ngozi's voice was hoarse from crying. "How can you possibly? Is there somewhere private we can talk?" Folktale glanced around at the very interested crowd. "Unless you want all of Ayatoro to hear this conversation?" Mom Ngozi's husband stood up quickly. "We can go to the back of the stall." They moved to the small covered area behind Mom Ngozi's table where she stored extra inventory. The crowd tried to follow, but Folktale smiled politely and said, "Excuse us." Business discussion, with enough authority that people actually stepped back. Once they had relative privacy, though dozens of ears were clearly straining to hear, Folktale settled onto an upturned crate and pulled out her notebook. "I've been watching this situation develop for weeks," she began. "Since the day you first told Aya Tund about the supposed engagement." Mom Ngozi's eyes widened. You heard that?" "I was buying fabric at Beezy's stall. I heard everything." Folktale's smile was knowing. "I watched the story spread. Saw it transform. Observed your increasingly desperate attempts to find actual candidates." She ticked off on her fingers. Blessing the teacher. Chioma the nurse. That disaster with Kemi from Abeokuta. "You've been watching me?" Mom Ngozi wasn't sure if she should be offended or terrified. "I've been watching a masterclass in how information spreads," Folktale corrected. "You're not the villain here, auntie. You're just entrepreneurial with the truth. You saw an opportunity to create engagement, to make your business more interesting. It just got away from you." It was the first time anyone had described what she'd done as anything other than lying. Mom Ngozi felt a small, shameful spark of vindication. "But that doesn't help me now," she said, her voice breaking again. "Tomorrow is the wedding. I have no bride. I owe millions of naira. I'm ruined. That's where I come in." Folktale leaned forward. "I can be your bride." Mom Ngozi's husband spoke up for the first time. But there has to be a real wedding. Legal marriage. The Oba won't accept. No, no, no. Folake held up her hand. Listen to my full plan before you reject it. She opened her notebook, and Mom Ngozi saw pages of notes, detailed, organized notes about the entire situation. This woman had been studying her disaster like a scientist studying an interesting specimen. Here's what we do, Folake began, and her voice took on the tone of someone who'd thought this through very carefully. Stage 1, tomorrow, Saturday, I arrive as the bride. We do a traditional engagement ceremony, you know, the kind that's culturally significant but not legally binding. Photos, blessings, celebration, the whole performance. This satisfies all the guests who traveled, who bought aso ebi, who committed money and time. Mom Ngozi was following, barely. Stage 2, after the ceremony, the Oba makes an announcement. Something like, due to both families' busy schedules and to allow for proper preparation, the white wedding will be postponed until next year. Something diplomatic that doesn't raise suspicions. But next year, Mom Ngozi started. Next year never comes, Folake interrupted gently. That's stage 3. Over the following months, we quietly let the engagement fade. We realized we want different things. The relationship didn't work out. We grew apart. People understand these things. Engagements end all the time. Nobody loses face because the ceremony happened, the celebration occurred, but the marriage itself just didn't work out. She sat back, watching Mom Ngozi process this. It's brilliant, Mom Ngozi's husband breathed. That might actually work, Mom Ngozi agreed slowly. The first hint of hope in 3 days flickered in her chest. But nothing is free in this world. Mom Ngozi had learned that lesson in the market over 15 years of trading. Every transaction had a cost. Every favor required payment. She looked at Folake, this confident, intelligent young woman who just offered her a lifeline. What do you want? Mom Ngozi asked, her voice steady now. Nobody does something like this for nothing. What's your price? Folake's smile widened, and in that moment, Mom Ngozi understood, she was about to make another deal. Another bargain. Another promise. She just hoped this one wouldn't explode in her face like the last one. Folake's expression shifted from amused to businesslike, the way people do when discussing terms they've already calculated down to the last detail. I have 2 conditions, she said, opening her notebook to a page that was clearly labeled Wedding Solution, Terms. Mom Ngozi and her husband exchanged glances. Here it comes. Condition 1, Tech Workshop Sponsorship. Tech, what? Mom Ngozi's mind was still catching up. Folake explained with the patience of someone who'd given this pitch before, I run free coding classes for young people in the village. Teaching them computer skills, digital literacy, basic programming. Right now, we're operating out of my uncle's shop with my personal laptop and unreliable internet from my phone's hotspot. She pulled out her phone, showing them photos of young people crowded around a single computer screen, taking notes on paper because there weren't enough devices. I need proper equipment. Computers, at least 5. Reliable internet connection. A dedicated space where we can meet regularly. She looked directly at Mom Ngozi. You're going to use your connections to get me sponsorship. My connections? Mom Ngozi almost laughed. I sell groundnuts. You know everyone in this village, Folake corrected. You know who has money, who owes favors, who responds to social pressure. After tomorrow, when I marry into the royal family, you'll have the Oba's ear. Local businesses will want to stay in the palace's good graces. You're going to help me leverage that. How much are we talking? Estimated cost, 200,000 naira for everything. But we'll spread it across multiple sponsors, 10 businesses at 20,000 each sounds more reasonable than asking one person for the full amount. Mom Ngozi's husband did quick mental math. That's actually manageable. If you know how to ask the right way. And I do, Mom Ngozi admitted. Manipulation was her specialty, after all. Just usually for smaller stakes. So that's all? She asked, almost relieved. Help you get sponsorship? Done. Easy. Folake's smile took on a slightly wicked edge. No. Condition 2. The way she said it made Mom Ngozi's stomach drop. 1 full year, Folake began, and Mom Ngozi noticed she was reading directly from her notebook, like she'd written this down to make sure she got the wording exactly right. 365 days. You will engage in no gossiping. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. What? No spreading unverified information. No rumors. No, I heard that. No, they say that. No embellishments. No adding spice to stories. Folake's voice was firm. You can sell your zobo. Chat with customers about weather, family, general pleasantries. But you cannot spread gossip. At all. About anyone. 1 year. Mom Ngozi's voice cracked on the last word. You caused chaos with your mouth, Folake said quietly. Now you rest it. But that's like... Mom Ngozi struggled to find the words. That's like asking a fish not to swim. Like asking a bird not to fly. Like asking the sun not to. Then drown in debt, Folake interrupted, her voice still calm but with steel underneath. Your choice. Help me educate these young people and learn to control your tongue, or lose everything you own and still owe more than 1 million naira. Mom Ngozi looked at her husband. He was doing that thing where he pretended not to have an opinion but his face clearly said, take the deal, woman. 1 year without gossip. 365 days. Mom Ngozi tried to imagine it. Her mouth, silent. Her tongue, still. Her stall, visited only for zobo and groundnuts, not for news. Her customers, bored. The other traders whispering that Mom Ngozi had lost her touch, her edge, her special something. It was like asking the sun not to shine. But then she imagined the alternative, her house sold to strangers. Her children coming home to find their belongings packed in boxes. Her husband's shame, quiet, dignified Bob Ngozi who'd never complained about her gossiping, forced to explain to everyone why they were destitute. Living with relatives who'd whisper about how Mom Ngozi's big mouth had destroyed her family. Her children's futures, school fees, university hopes, marriage prospects, all ruined because their mother couldn't control her tongue. 1 year of silence. Or a lifetime of consequences. She took a deep breath. Released it slowly. Deal. They shook hands. Folake's grip was firm, final. The kind of handshake that meant the contract was sealed. Good, Folake said, making a note in her book. Now, we need to convince the prince. He's not talking to me, Mom Ngozi admitted. After yesterday, he said he was done. Told me to figure something else out. Leave that to me. Folake pulled out her phone with the confidence of someone who'd already planned this conversation. She dialed. Someone answered on the second ring. Prince Adeyemi? This is Folake. Folake Ogunlade, I run the digital skills program. Yes, that Folake. I need 10 minutes of your time. It's about tomorrow's wedding situation. No, I'm not another desperate candidate. I have a solution. Yes, a real one. Can I call you in 5 minutes? I need to explain something that sounds insane but is actually brilliant. She hung up and immediately dialed another number. Uncle, it's me. I need Prince Adeyemi's personal number, the one he uses for business. Yes, I know you have it from the youth council meetings. Uncle, this is important. Thank you. 2 minutes later, she was calling the prince directly. Prince Adeyemi, listen carefully because this will sound crazy. I'm proposing to be your fake bride for tomorrow's ceremony. No, wait, let me finish. Traditional engagement only, not legally binding. We satisfy the guests, save face for the palace, and quietly end the engagement in a few months. More insane than your current situation. Exactly. 1 ceremony. A few hours of your time. Photos, smiles, blessings. Then freedom. What do I get? A good story. And funding for my students' tech program. You're either a genius or crazy. Usually both, thank you. She listened for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Meet me at the palace in 1 hour. We'll practice looking like a couple. Yes, I'm serious. This works only if we're convincing. 1 hour. Don't be late. She hung up and looked at Mom and Ngozi. He's in. Just like that. He's desperate, I'm offering a solution, and unlike everyone else, I actually have a plan. Folake stood up, brushing dust from her jeans. Now we tell the Oba. The Oba looked even more exhausted than he had 2 days ago when this had all started. When his aide announced that Mom and Ngozi had returned with a young woman who claimed to have a solution, his expression suggested he expected another disaster. Kabiyesi, Folake began, skipping the traditional prostration and going straight to a respectful bow, modern respect for traditional authority. My name is Folake Ogunlade. I run a digital skills training program here in Ayatoro. You might remember me from the youth council presentations last year. The Oba's eyes narrowed. I remember. You wanted funding for computers. Still do, Folake said with a slight smile. But today I'm here to solve your wedding problem. She laid out the plan with the precision of a business presentation: traditional engagement ceremony, strategic postponement announcement, quiet dissolution over time. She showed him her notes, her timeline, her risk assessment. The Oba listened without interrupting. When she finished, he sat back in his chair, studying her. You're clever, he finally said, and it sounded like an accusation and a compliment simultaneously. I'm from this village, Folake replied. We don't survive without being clever. A smile tugged at the corner of the Oba's mouth, the first smile Mom and Ngozi had seen from him in 3 days. If this works, he said slowly, I want you to teach business strategy to our youth council. Clearly, you understand negotiation and problem-solving better than most adults I know. Deal, Folake agreed immediately. The Oba nodded. Then we have a wedding to prepare for. Mom and Ngozi, you're dismissed. But remember, his voice took on that dangerous calm again, this only works if everyone plays their part. Including you. No more lies. No more stories. You follow this young woman's plan exactly. Understood. Yes, Kabiyesi. Mom and Ngozi practically ran out of the palace before he could change his mind. And so, with less than 24 hours to spare, the impossible wedding had a bride. Sort of. Now all they had to do was convince 300 guests, countless relatives, a professional photographer, 2 WhatsApp prayer groups, the local newspaper, and the entire village that true love happens in 3 weeks. How hard could that be? Saturday morning, 6 a.m. Mom and Ngozi hadn't slept. She'd tried, lying in bed with her eyes closed, counting sheep, counting customers, counting the ways this plan could fall apart, but sleep refused to come. At 5 a.m., she'd given up and gotten dressed. Now, at 6 a.m., she was wearing her best Ankara wrapper and matching blouse, the outfit she'd been saving for a special occasion. Her head tie had been tied and retied 4 times because her hands kept shaking. If this doesn't work. Her husband said from the doorway, not finishing the sentence because they both knew what came after those words. Debt. Shame. Ruin. It will work, Mom and Ngozi said, with more confidence than she felt. It has to work. She was checking her mental list for the 100th time. Folake had her outfit. The Oba knew the plan. Prince Adeyemi had agreed to play along. The announcement was prepared. Everything was in place. Everything except her nerves, which were performing acrobatics in her stomach. Come, her husband said gently. Let's get breakfast. You need strength. But Mom and Ngozi couldn't imagine eating. Her throat felt too tight. Her future, her entire life, depended on the next 8 hours going exactly according to plan. Across the village, in a modest 2-bedroom house, Folake was surprisingly calm. She stood in front of a full-length mirror borrowed from her aunt, examining the traditional iro and buba, wrapper and blouse, that had been hastily sourced yesterday evening. Deep burgundy fabric with gold threading. Elegant without being too expensive. Perfect for a princess who was practical and modern. Her younger sister, Temilade, was helping with the geli, the elaborate head tie that was proving more complicated than Folake's usual simple styles. Are you nervous? Temilade asked, adjusting the fabric for the 3rd time. Folake smiled at her reflection. About what? It's just performance art. You're fake marrying a prince in front of the entire village. Technically, I'm attending a traditional engagement ceremony that has no legal standing and will be quietly dissolved in 6 months. Folake turned her head, examining the geli from another angle. It's theater. I've done presentations in front of investors. This is just a very elaborate pitch. You're crazy, Temilade said, but there was admiration in her voice. Probably, Folake agreed. But I'm also about to get funding for 5 computers and a year's worth of internet. Worth a few hours of pretending. Still, when she looked at herself in the mirror, dressed as a bride, about to walk into a ceremony that was simultaneously fake and very, very real, she felt a small flutter of something that might have been nerves. Or excitement. Or both. At the palace, Prince Adeyemi was staring at his reflection with the expression of a man reconsidering all his life choices. His traditional agbada lay on the bed, deep blue fabric embroidered with gold thread, the kind of outfit that signaled royalty and serious occasions. The kind of outfit you wore to your actual wedding. Except this wasn't his actual wedding. This was an elaborate performance to save a gossiping groundnut seller from financial ruin and preserve his father's dignity. Adeyemi. His mother's voice preceded her into the room. She entered already dressed in her own finery, her geli tied with the precision of decades of practice. Why aren't you dressed? The ceremony starts at 2 p.m. It's 7 a.m., Mama. And you need time to prepare. Mentally, spiritually, she stopped, looking at him carefully. Are you okay? Having second thoughts. I'm having all the thoughts. He turned from the mirror. Mama, you know this is. I know it's unusual, she interrupted. But I looked up this girl. Folake. She's intelligent. Educated. Doing good work in the community with those computer classes. His mother sat on his bed, smoothing the agbada fabric. She's beautiful too. I saw her photo. Mama, this isn't, he stopped. How could he explain that this was a fake wedding designed to save face? That in 6 months, they'd announced the engagement was off? I'm just saying, his mother continued, stranger things have happened. My own mother and father were introduced 1 week before their engagement ceremony. They were married 43 years before your grandfather passed. Sometimes, arrangements become love. Prince Adeyemi looked at his mother, eternally hopeful, already imagining grandchildren, and didn't have the heart to correct her assumptions. Just, keep an open mind, she said, patting his arm. Now get dressed. You have a wedding to attend. After she left, Prince Adeyemi picked up his phone and found a message from Folake, sent at 6:47 a.m. Ready to be a convincing couple? Meet me at the palace side entrance at 9 a.m. We need to practice looking like we actually like each other. Despite everything, he smiled. By 8 a.m., Ayatoro had transformed into something from a Nollywood film. The caterers arrived in 3 vehicles, unloading industrial pots that smelled of promise, jollof rice cooked to that perfect orange red that made mouths water, fried rice gleaming with vegetables, moin moin wrapped in leaves, puff puff golden and sweet, small chops that would disappear within minutes of being served. The decorators were putting final touches on their work, gold and burgundy fabric draped from canopy poles, fairy lights strung between trees even though they'd only light up after sunset, traditional fabrics creating backdrops for photos, white chairs arranged in perfect rows. The band finished their sound check, drums and talking drums creating rhythms that echoed through the morning. The DJ tested his equipment, playing a snippet of Davido before switching to traditional wedding music. The photographer, a young man from Ibadan who'd been paid a substantial deposit and threatened with the Oba's displeasure if he failed, was setting up camera angles, identifying the best lighting, planning his shots like a military operation. Around the village, people were preparing. Women gathered in groups, helping each other tie their geli, the elaborate head wraps that could take 20 minutes and 3 people to achieve properly. They debated angles, heights, whether to go dramatic or elegant. Men dressed in their agbada, adjusting caps, checking that their shoes were polished. Some had rented outfits specifically for this occasion, others wore family heirloom pieces that smelled faintly of mothballs and memories. Children were excited for reasons having nothing to do with romance. Wedding meant party jollof, that magical rice that tasted different from home jollof, that special flavor that only came from industrial-sized pots and caterers who knew secret spices. And through it all, the gossip mill continued its work. I heard the bride is a lawyer from Lagos. No, she's a doctor. A heart surgeon. My cousin said she met him at a conference in Dubai. Her father is a senator. They're having Davido and Burna Boy perform. The rumors had taken on a life entirely separate from reality, each person adding their own details, their own embellishments. Mama Ngozi heard these conversations as she moved through the village in a daze. She wanted to correct them. No, she's from right here, she teaches coding, and we met yesterday, but her gossip ban started today. She'd made a promise to Folktale. So she just smiled and nodded, keeping her mouth shut for possibly the first time in 45 years. By 10 a.m., Ayatoro looked like a Nollywood movie set. The palace grounds were magnificent. The decorations were stunning. The food smelled like heaven. The band was ready. The photographer was positioned. The guests were arriving, dressed in their finest, phones out to document every moment. Everything was perfect. Beautiful. Magnificent. It was the wedding of the year. Except for one tiny, insignificant, absolutely crucial detail. The bride and groom had met for the first time exactly 1 hour ago, at 9 a.m., at the palace side entrance, where Folktale had taught Prince Adeyemi how to hold her hand convincingly and he'd taught her to pronounce his Yoruba praise names correctly. They'd practiced looking at each other like people in love instead of people executing a business arrangement. They'd rehearsed their entrance, their seating, their responses to blessings. They were strangers performing intimacy for an audience of hundreds. And in less than 4 hours, they'd have to convince everyone that they were something they absolutely were not. A couple. Lagos, a bus that had brought an entire delegation from a neighboring town. Drivers argued over parking spaces. Children ran between vehicles, excited by the chaos. The relatives from Lagos arrived in matching gold aso-ebi, already complaining about the terrible roads from the highway. The Ibadan contingent came with coolers of drinks, because they didn't trust village refreshments. The Abuja group arrived fashionably late, as was their custom. And then there was the London cousin. She emerged from a taxi in full traditional attire that had clearly been tailored in the UK, her accent now permanently affected by years abroad. The jet lag is killing me, she announced to anyone within hearing distance. 14 hours on a plane for this. 14. Nobody pointed out that she'd known about the wedding for 3 weeks and could have arrived earlier to recover. Neighboring village delegations came with their traditional rulers or representatives, bearing gifts and congratulations. Local government officials arrived with the self-importance of people who believed their presence made events legitimate. And through it all, the photographer moved like a shark through water, capturing everything: the arrivals, the greetings, the outfits, the decorations. His camera shutter clicked constantly, building an archive of this elaborate fiction. The palace grounds had been divided into 2 sections, as tradition demanded. The groom's side wore blue aso-ebi, a deep navy that looked regal under the midday sun. Prince Adeyemi's relatives, friends, and supporters filled the chairs, fanning themselves against the heat, chatting excitedly. The bride's side wore gold aso-ebi, shimmering fabric that caught the light beautifully. Folktale's family was a magnificent con, her actual uncle and aunt, her cousins, her friends from the tech program, some volunteers who'd been promised free food and a good story, and even a few paid actors who stood in as wealthy Lagos relatives. Nobody questioned the arrangement. Both sides looked legitimate, prosperous, exactly what you'd expect at a royal wedding. The master of ceremonies, a man whose voice could reach neighboring states without amplification, tested his microphone. Test, 1 2, 1 2. Ayo. We have come to celebrate love today. The DJ played Afrobeats, Wizkid's essence fading into Burna Boy's Last, creating an atmosphere of celebration. People were already dancing in their seats. The energy was electric. The music changed. Traditional drums began, talking drums, gem, the deep bass rhythm that announced something important was happening. The crowd turned as one toward the entrance. A decorated car appeared, not expensive, but covered in ribbons and flowers and traditional fabrics. It moved slowly, ceremonially, giving everyone time to pull out their phones. When Folktale emerged, the crowd gasped. She was stunning. The burgundy iro and buba fit perfectly, the gold threading catching sunlight like she was wearing liquid metal. Her geli was a masterpiece of fabric engineering, tied high and dramatic, the kind that said I am bride, hear me roar. Light makeup enhanced rather than hid her features. And her smile, confident, serene, perfect, suggested a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. She's beautiful, someone shouted. So elegant. The prince is blessed. Look at her. Royal blood already. Folktale walked toward the ceremony space with measured steps, flanked by her sisters, actually her younger sister Temilade and two friends who were taking their roles very seriously. Mom Ngozi stood at the edge of the crowd, partially hidden behind a pillar, watching the bride she'd found in a market yesterday transform into a princess before her eyes. Her hand covered her mouth. Tears ran down her cheeks, not tears of joy, but tears of pure, overwhelming relief. This was working. It was actually working. Mom Ngozi. Ayatund appeared beside her, beaming. You must be so proud. Look at this wedding you predicted. And the bride is even more beautiful than the rumors said. Mom Ngozi couldn't speak. She just nodded, keeping her mouth firmly shut against the instinct to correct, to explain, to tell the truth. 1 year without gossiping started now. Prince Adeyemi's uncles approached the bride's family section with ceremonial seriousness. They carried a tray bearing gifts, kola nuts, symbol of welcome and negotiation, palm wine, symbol of celebration, and envelopes containing money, symbol of respect and seriousness of intention. Folktale's uncle, her actual uncle, who'd been briefed yesterday and still looked slightly confused about the whole situation, stood to receive them. The lead uncle spoke in Yoruba, his voice carrying the weight of tradition. We come before you with respect and humility. We have seen a flower in your garden, and we wish to pluck it for our son. The traditional back and forth followed, playful negotiation, exaggerated reluctance, theatrical consideration. The crowd loved it, laughing and cheering at the performance. Finally, after much consideration, the bride's family accepted the gifts. Traditional prayers were offered in Yoruba, blessings for fertility, prosperity, long life, harmony. Women ululated, that high-pitched sound of celebration that could shatter glass at close range. This was everyone's favorite part. Folktale was brought out, her face covered with a decorated fan, led by her sisters. The MC explained with theatrical flair, the bride must now identify her husband among the men. Let us see if this is true love. The crowd pressed forward, phones recording. Folktale approached the men's section slowly. She stopped in front of an elderly uncle, paused dramatically, then shook her head. The crowd roared with laughter. She moved to a younger cousin, pretended to consider, then moved on. More laughter. Finally, she stood before Prince Adeyemi. Paused. Lowered her fan. And pointed at him. The crowd erupted. She knows him. True love. See how she went straight to him. This is destiny. Prince Adeyemi stood, trying to look natural and like a man in love rather than a man who'd met his bride 2 hours ago. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the tense shade. But he managed to smile, extending his hand to lead her to the ceremony seats. They sat side by side on elaborately decorated chairs that looked like thrones. The perfect couple. The perfect match. The Oba stood to give his blessing speech. His voice carried authority and emotion, most of it real, because regardless of the circumstances, his son was participating in a traditional ceremony, and tradition mattered. Today, we join 2 families, he began. 2 lives. 2 futures. May this union bring prosperity, harmony, and joy. Folktale's uncle gave advice to the couple, standard wisdom about patience, communication, respect. His voice wavered slightly because he still wasn't entirely sure what was happening but had been promised it was important. Both families exchanged gifts, more envelopes, traditional fabrics, symbolic items. The photographer was having the time of his life, his camera clicking like a machine gun, capturing every angle, every moment, every smile. The DJ, sensing the emotional peak, played Duduk by Simi, that perfect wedding song about love and commitment. When she touched his arm, a simple gesture of affection, the crowd went, awe. When he smiled at her, a genuine smile because her acting was impressive, people shouted, see love. True love. They fed each other cake, a tradition borrowed from Western weddings but fully adopted. She dabbed frosting on his nose playfully. He laughed. It looked so natural, so spontaneous, so real. Their acting was so good, even they almost believed it. From her corner, Mom Ngozi observed the ceremony with an emotion she couldn't quite name. In another life, in another circumstance, this could have been real. They looked right together. The prince, educated, respectful, gentle in his mannerisms. Folktale, confident, intelligent, commanding respect without demanding it. The way they moved together, spoke to each other, even in this performance, suggested compatibility. Maybe, just maybe, her lie had accidentally predicted something true. But no. She pushed the thought away. This was business. A transaction. A solution to a problem. Nothing more. The music stopped. The sudden silence was deafening. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC's voice boomed through the speakers. We have an important announcement from the Oba. Everyone's attention snapped to the Oba, who stood slowly, his face carefully neutral. This was it. The moment that would either save Mom Ngozi or destroy her completely. She held her breath. Her husband found her hand in the crowd and squeezed it. Even the children stopped eating jollof rice, sensing something significant was happening. The Oba opened his mouth to speak. And Mom Ngozi's entire future hung on whatever words came next. The Oba stood, microphone in hand, every inch the traditional ruler he'd been for 2 decades. Dignified. Composed. The kind of man who could deliver devastating news or joyful announcements with the same regal bearing. Every eye in the palace grounds fixed on him. Phones stopped recording. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the caterers paused their service. He cleared his throat, and the sound echoed through the speakers like thunder. My people of Ayatoro, he began, his voice carrying the warmth of celebration and the authority of leadership, our friends from far and wide, we thank you for joining us today to celebrate this joyous traditional introduction between my son, Prince Adeyemi, and this wonderful young woman, Folktale. The crowd applauded. Folktale and Prince Adeyemi smiled, holding hands with practiced ease. As you know, the Oba continued, we live in modern times. Both of these young people have demanding careers. My son in banking, working on important financial projects. This beautiful bride, he gestured toward Folktale, in technology and education, teaching our youth valuable skills for the future. Guests nodded approvingly. A modern couple. Forward-thinking. Perfect. After extensive consultation with both families, we have decided that the white wedding ceremony will take place next year, when schedules permit and proper preparations can be made. A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Next year? The Oba raised his voice, filling it with celebration. But today we celebrate their commitment, their union, and the joining of 2 families. Let us eat, dance, and give thanks. For one suspended moment, silence hung in the air as people processed this information. Then, explosion. Next year is fine, someone shouted, and suddenly everyone agreed. At least we came for party. The jollof rice is excellent. I got my photos. That's what matters. The London cousin, who'd been complaining about jet lag for 2 days, stood up and declared loudly, well, I didn't fly here for nothing. If there's jollof and dancing, it was worth it. The relief was palpable. Nobody had wasted their time. Nobody had been deceived. There was a ceremony. There would be a wedding. Just, later. That was reasonable. That made sense. Modern couples did this all the time. The party continues. The DJ, sensing the mood shift from nervous anticipation to full celebration, cranked up the volume. Davido's Fall blasted through the speakers, and the dance floor, a section of cleared ground under the canopy, filled immediately. People danced with the abandon of those who'd been given permission to celebrate. Money began flying, naira notes thrown in the air, landing on Prince Adeyemi and Folktale as guests sprayed them with cash according to tradition. The notes fluttered like confetti, and children scrambled to collect the fallen bills. Small chops circulated on trays, puff-puff, spring rolls, samosas, meat pie, disappearing faster than the caterers could bring them out. But the real star, as always, was the jollof rice. That perfect party jollof, smoky, slightly burnt at the bottom, the best part, rich with tomato and spices that no home cook could quite replicate. Plates piled high disappeared in minutes. People went back for seconds, thirds. The caterers smiled, satisfied. Good jollof meant good word of mouth. Instagram stories multiplied like cells. Hashtag Ayatoro Royal Wedding 2025, hashtag Prince and Princess, hashtag Traditional Engagement, hashtag Nigerian Wedding. Phones held high, capturing everything, broadcasting this moment to the wider world. In the middle of the chaos, surrounded by dancing guests, flying money, and enough food to feed a small army, Prince Adeyemi leaned close to Folktale so she could hear him over the music. "We did it." She turned to him, her gelly slightly askew from the dancing, her smile genuine now that the hardest part was over. "We're actors now. Nollywood should call us. I'm thinking I could do action films. You'd be good in romance." He laughed, a real laugh, born of relief and the absurdity of their situation. This whole thing was like a heist movie. Elaborate plan, perfect timing, one chance to get it right. And we nailed it. They laughed together, and the photographer, who had excellent instincts for genuine moments, captured it. The photo would show two people looking at each other with joy, amusement, and something that looked remarkably like affection. It looked genuinely happy. Because in that moment, it was. Mama Ngozi collapsed into a chair someone had vacated, her legs finally giving out after 3 days of terror. She'd done it. They'd done it. The impossible had been achieved. Her husband appeared beside her, carrying a cup of zobo, the irony of which was not lost on either of them. The drink that had started this whole disaster was now celebrating its end. "We survived," she whispered, taking the cup with shaking hands. He sat beside her, solid and patient as he'd always been, and kissed her forehead. "Never again." "Never," she agreed, nodding so vigorously her head tie shifted. "I learned my lesson. 1 year of silence, then careful forever. I swear it." "I'll believe it when I see it," he said, but his voice was gentle. "But for now, drink your zobo. You earned it." Around them, the celebration continued. Music, laughter, dancing, eating. The sounds of a successful wedding. No one knew it was fake. No one suspected the elaborate performance they'd all just witnessed. As far as Ayatoro was concerned, this was a love story for the ages. The party lasted until 8 p.m., long after the sun had set and the fairy lights created a magical glow over the palace grounds. People ate until they couldn't move. Danced until their feet hurt. Took enough photos to fill phone memories. Collected memories and stories they'd tell for months. At the prince's wedding, the jollof was so good. When I danced with the Oba's wife. The bride was so beautiful. They went home satisfied, fulfilled, having witnessed something special. The wedding that never was had been a complete success. Mama Ngozi's 3 million naira debt was erased, no caterers demanding payment, no angry decorators, no traumatized band, no London cousin threatening legal action. The Oba's dignity remained intact. His son had participated in a proper traditional ceremony, photographed and documented, respectable and royal. Prince Adeyemi could return to his life in Ibadan, his colleagues satisfied that they'd seen the photos, his family pleased with the bride he'd chosen. And Folktale had secured funding for her tech workshop, plus a story that would entertain her students for years. Everyone won. The end. Except, this is Nigeria. And in Nigeria, nothing, absolutely nothing, ever ends that simply. Two weeks after the fake wedding, life in Ayatoro had returned to something resembling normal. Sort of. At Mama Ngozi's stall, business continued as it always had, groundnuts arranged in pyramids, zobo in jerry cans, customers coming and going. But something fundamental had changed. Mama Ngozi was quiet. Not sick quiet or sad quiet, but voluntarily, deliberately, painfully quiet. When customers tried to start conversations that might lead to gossip territory, she redirected with the desperation of an addict avoiding temptation. "Mama, did you hear about Baba Tund and that woman from? These groundnuts are fresh." Mama Ngozi interrupted with forced enthusiasm. "Buy 2 bags, get discount. Very special offer today only." The customer blinked, confused by the sudden sales pitch, and the moment of potential gossip passed. Day 14 of gossip sobriety, Mama Ngozi thought to herself, measuring out groundnuts with shaking hands. I've almost slipped 23 times. My tongue feels imprisoned, like a bird in a cage that can see the sky but can't fly. But a promise is a promise. 351 days to go. The calculation alone was exhausting. Mama, you've changed, Ayatund observed one morning, studying her old friend with concern. Age is doing it, Mom Ngozi replied, avoiding eye contact. You're only 45. Feels like 90. Around the market, around the village, people still talked about the engagement. The ceremony had been so beautiful, so perfect, exactly what a royal wedding should be. Such a beautiful ceremony. I've watched the video 3 times. I can't wait for the real wedding next year. I'm already saving for a new outfit. The prince looked so happy. And that bride, elegant. Educated. Perfect match. Mom Ngozi just smiled and nodded, keeping her mouth firmly shut, her tongue pressed against her teeth to prevent any words from escaping. It was torture. Across the village, at Folktale's tech hub, success was blooming. The new computers had arrived, 5 brand new laptops, courtesy of sponsorships Mom Ngozi had helped secure from the Oba, local businesses, and even some wealthy individuals who wanted to stay in the palace's good graces. 30 young people now attended regular classes. The space, a renovated shop that had been sitting empty, buzzed with the sound of typing, mouse clicks, and Folktale's patient explanations. No, not that button, the one next to it. Yes. See? You're getting it. She moved between students with energy and enthusiasm, her element completely. This was what she'd worked for, what she'd fake married a prince to achieve. Everything she'd asked for had been delivered. The promise had been kept. 90 kilometers away in Ibadan, Prince Adeyemi was back at his desk at the bank, reviewing loan applications and trying to focus on interest rates instead of the increasingly awkward situation his life had become. His colleagues wouldn't let it go. So when's the wedding, Mr. Almost Married? Next year, he'd say with a practiced laugh, the same response he'd given 17 times already. Your fiancé is beautiful. I saw the photos on Instagram. Thank you. When is she moving to Ibadan? We're still figuring out logistics. The lies were getting more elaborate. The fake engagement required constant maintenance, remembering what he'd told whom, keeping the story consistent, maintaining the illusion. Weekend visits home, once a relaxing escape from city life, had become minefields of maternal expectations. Have you called Folktale this week? Yes, Mama. When is she visiting? I want to know my daughter-in-law better. She's busy with her work, Mama. Teaching schedule. What about grandchildren? You're not getting younger. Mama, we just got engaged. Exactly. Strike while the iron is hot. Prince Adeyemi was beginning to understand why people in fake relationships in movies looked so stressed. But here's the thing about fake relationships, sometimes the act becomes harder to maintain than the real thing. And sometimes, just sometimes, the line between pretending and feeling gets dangerously blurry. What starts as performance can become practice. What begins as acting can become something else. Week 3 after the wedding. Prince Adeyemi told himself he was visiting Ayatoro to see his parents. Filial duty. Family obligations. Nothing unusual. But somehow, his Saturday afternoon walk took him past Folktale's tech hub. Just happened to pass by. Through the open door, he could see her teaching, standing in front of a whiteboard, marker in hand, explaining something about loops and functions to a group of teenagers who were actually paying attention. She made them laugh, then refocused them, then made a complex concept simple with an analogy about cooking jollof rice. She was patient, funny, passionate about education. Something shifted in his chest. Something uncomfortable and unexpected. Just checking on my investment, he told himself. He'd donated money for equipment, after all. Perfectly reasonable to verify it was being used properly. After the class ended, Folktale spotted him hovering at the entrance. The fake husband returns, she called out, grinning. Just passing by. Right. And I'm the Queen of England. She gestured him inside. Since you're here, want to help? That computer keeps shutting down randomly. He did want to help. Which was strange, because usually his weekends were sacred rest time. They worked side by side for an hour, troubleshooting the laptop, their heads bent over the keyboard, occasionally bumping shoulders, laughing when they discovered the problem was a loose power connection. All that work for a loose wire, Folktale said. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. When he left, he felt lighter somehow. Energized. He told himself it was just the satisfaction of helping with a technical problem. He visited again. Brought equipment she'd mentioned needing, an external hard drive, some cables, a USB hub. I had connections at the bank, he explained. Vendors who owed us favors. You didn't have to do this. I know. After class, they grabbed suya from the evening vendor, spicy grilled meat wrapped in newspaper, eaten while walking through the village. They talked about goals, dreams, the future of technology in rural areas. She was impressed by his vision for rural development, his ideas about mobile banking reaching underserved communities. He was inspired by her grassroots approach, her belief that education was the foundation for everything else. You could do this in other villages, he said. Scale it up. I could help with the funding structure. Slow down, bankerman. Let me get this one right first. But she was smiling. And he noticed her smile did something strange to his concentration. His colleagues noticed the pattern. Didn't you just go home last weekend? Just checking on things. Things? Or someone? Knowing looks. At the tech hub, the students had definitely noticed. Brother Prince is here again. Oh, they'd chorus when he appeared. Our future royal in-law. When is the white wedding? We want to dance. Folktale would blush, actually blush, which she never did, and tell them to focus on their work. But she'd also started timing her classes to end when he usually visited. Not that she'd admit that. From her market stall, Mom Ngozi had been watching this development with the keen eye of someone who'd spent 15 years reading people. She saw them walking together. Laughing together. The way Prince Adeyemi found excuses to visit the village more often. The way Folktale's face lit up when he appeared. The body language that had shifted from business partners to something else entirely. This wasn't acting anymore. This was real. She turned to Aya Tund, who was buying her morning zobo, and opened her mouth. I think those two are actually. Then she caught herself. Remembered her promise. The 1-year ban. Day 42 of 365. She physically bit her tongue. Actually bit it, tasting copper. You were saying? Aya Tund prompted, leaning in eagerly. Nothing. Nothing at all. The words came out strangled. Are you sure? You look like you're about to burst. Just indigestion. Bad akra this morning. Aya Tund left, disappointed, and Mom Ngozi released her tongue, wincing. Her husband appeared from behind the stall, having witnessed the entire struggle. He looked at what she'd been staring at, Prince Adeyemi and Folktale, now sitting on a bench under a tree, talking with their heads close together. Don't, he said firmly. Don't even think it. But I'm not saying anything. Mama Ngozi protested. See my mouth? Closed. Silent. Like a grave. Keep it that way. This is torture, she hissed. Do you see them? Do you see what's happening? My lie is becoming truth. Right in front of my eyes. And I can't say anything. Good, her husband said with satisfaction. Suffering builds character. I have enough character. But she kept her mouth shut, watching the universe do what the universe does best, take chaos and somehow, impossibly, turn it into something that looked a lot like destiny. Mom Ngozi was bound by her promise. But the universe, it seemed, was not. And what the universe was doing looked an awful lot like finishing what Mom Ngozi had accidentally started 6 weeks ago with one small lie about a prince and a bride who didn't exist. Except now, maybe, she did. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by palace messengers to every household in Ayatoro. Physical, printed invitations, the expensive kind with embossed lettering and quality cardstock. Traditional gold and burgundy colors, the same as the first ceremony. But this time, the words were different. You are cordially invited to the wedding ceremony of Prince Adeyemi Ogunlade and Miss Folake Ogunlade. Date: 6 months after their traditional engagement. Venue: Palace Grounds, Ayatoro. Join us as we celebrate their union in holy matrimony. The village reaction was predictable chaos. Wait, didn't they already marry? That was just the traditional introduction, now they're doing the white wedding. Oh, another party. At the beer parlor, Baba Sola was already calculating profits, 2 royal weddings in 1 year. Business is good. The caterers were practically dancing, we're eating well this year. 2 ceremonies means double payment. Women immediately began planning new outfits. The first aso-ebi couldn't be worn again, that would be a fashion crime. New fabric. New styles. New geli designs. At Mom Ngozi's stall, she stared at the invitation with trembling hands. Customers buzzed around her like excited bees. Mom Ngozi. You knew. You told us first. You predicted this. You said they were getting married and everyone laughed, but you were right. Mama, you must have spiritual vision. How did you know? Mom Ngozi couldn't speak. Her throat had closed up completely. I lied, she thought, the words screaming in her mind. I made it up. I invented a wedding to sell zobo. And somehow it became true. The mathematics of coincidence seemed impossibly small. The odds of a random lie accidentally predicting the future felt like divine intervention or cosmic joke, she wasn't sure which. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Ayatun grabbed her arm. Mama. Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I'm fine, Mom Ngozi managed. Just surprised. Surprised? You told us first. Don't be modest. Mom Ngozi's year of silence had expired 2 months ago, but she found herself still reluctant to claim credit for something that felt less like prophecy and more like the universe having an elaborate sense of humor. If the first ceremony had been beautiful, the second was magnificent. This time, there were no fake families, no pretend relationships, no elaborate lies to maintain. This was real. Genuine. Legal. Folake emerged from the church in a white wedding dress that made the first outfit look like a rehearsal costume. Stunning lace, perfect fit, a train that required 3 flower girls to manage. Her makeup was professional, her smile radiant. Prince Adeyemi stood at the altar in a navy blue suit, looking at his bride with an expression that made single women in the congregation sigh with envy and married women elbow their husbands meaningfully. The church ceremony was emotional. The pastor, who knew the whole story and found it hilariously divine, kept references to unexpected beginnings in his sermon. When it came time for vows, Prince Adeyemi went off script. Folake, 6 months ago, you agreed to fake marry me to solve what was possibly the most ridiculous problem I've ever had. Laughter rippled through the church. Thank you for that. And thank you for somehow making me fall in love with you during the process. Best decision I never planned to make. The congregation laughed and cried simultaneously. Folake's response was equally honest. Who knew that pretending to love you would accidentally become real? Turns out, I'm a terrible actor. Or maybe I was never acting at all. More laughter. More tears. The photographer was having the time of his life. The reception at the palace was even more elaborate than the first party. The jollof is better than last time, became the consensus opinion, though some argued it was psychologically impossible and they were just hungrier. And then, the moment that made social media explode, Davido actually performed. Prince Adeyemi's banker salary and some strategic sponsorships had made it possible. 3 songs. The crowd lost their collective minds. Dancing lasted until midnight. Real joy, real love, real celebration. During a quiet moment between the dancing and the cake cutting, Folake and Prince Adeyemi approached Mom Ngozi where she sat at the edge of the celebration. She saw them coming and panicked. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to lie. I just wanted to sell zobo and the story got away from me and I nearly destroyed everything and... Thank you, Folake interrupted. Mom Ngozi stopped mid-ramble. What? Prince Adeyemi smiled, a genuine, warm smile. If you hadn't lied, I never would have met her. Never would have been forced into that fake ceremony. Never would have spent time getting to know the woman I was pretending to marry. Sometimes, Folktale added, taking her husband's hand, the wrong path leads to the right destination. Your lie created circumstances that brought us together. I'm not saying lying is good, she gave Mom Ngozi a pointed look, but in this case, something beautiful came from something messy. Prince Adeyemi nodded. So thank you, Mom Ngozi, for your terrible, chaos-creating, almost ruinous lie. It gave me my wife. They hugged her. Mom Ngozi burst into tears, full, ugly, shoulder-shaking crying. Her second public crying this year, which was unprecedented in her 45 years of life. I'm so happy, she sobbed into Foltake's shoulder. And so confused. And so relieved I don't owe 3 million naira. They laughed, and the photographer captured the moment, the matchmaker who never meant to be, crying happy tears at the wedding her lie had accidentally created. One week later, Monday morning, life had returned to normal. Mom Ngozi was at her stall, arranging groundnuts, when Ayatun arrived with her usual order and an unusual amount of enthusiasm. Mom Ngozi, you must feel so vindicated. You predicted the prince's wedding and everyone doubted you, and now look. You were right. You should tell everyone I told you so. Mom Ngozi opened her mouth, the instinct to take credit was strong, burning in her throat like pepper. She paused. Remembered the 3 days of terror. The impossible bride hunt. The debt that nearly destroyed her family. The year of forced silence. The lesson learned the hardest way possible. She closed her mouth. Opened it again. Spoke carefully. I didn't predict anything. God did. I just made noise. Loud, chaotic, almost destructive noise. She measured out Ayatun's groundnuts with steady hands. The fact that it worked out wasn't because of my wisdom. It was despite my foolishness. Ayatun blinked, surprised by this uncharacteristic humility. The prince and Folktale found each other, Mom Ngozi continued. My lie just accidentally put them in the same room. God did the rest. She wrapped the groundnuts in newspaper, handed them over, and smiled, a real smile, free of the need to embellish or exaggerate or take credit for things beyond her control. 1 year later, Mom Ngozi still sold groundnuts and zobo at Oja Market. Her stall looked the same, wooden table, pyramid arrangements, jerry cans of deep red zobo. But something fundamental had changed. She still chatted with customers, still laughed and joked and engaged in the social dance of market commerce. But now she listened more than she talked. Asked questions instead of making statements. Shared wisdom instead of spreading rumors. Her 1-year gossip ban had expired, but she'd continued the discipline. Not perfectly, she was still human, still tempted, but consistently enough that reformed gossip had become her new identity. Mom Ngozi has changed, people would say. Not critically, but with respect. She's become wise. Her stall remained popular. Good zobo matters. But now people came for different reasons, not for the latest scandal, but for perspective. Advice. The kind of measured wisdom that only comes from someone who'd learned the hard way about the power of words. Who knew silence could be so powerful. Across the village, Foltake's tech hub was thriving. 100 students now cycled through her programs. The space had expanded to 3 rooms. Prince Adeyemi served on the board of directors, combining his banking connections with her grassroots vision. Several graduates had gotten tech jobs in Lagos and sent money home, proving the village that education was investment, not expense. The Oba visited regularly, watching young people code and design and build digital futures. This, he'd say with satisfaction, is progress. At the palace, life had taken on a joyful rhythm. Folktale was 6 months pregnant. The entire village was thrilled, already debating whether the baby would be a boy or girl, already planning celebrations, already knitting tiny clothes. She still ran her tech hub, teaching classes until her doctor insisted she slow down. Modern princess, balancing tradition with innovation. Prince Adeyemi commuted from Ibadan during the week, came home on weekends, was the kind of supportive husband that made other men look bad by comparison. Everyone agreed, they were perfect together. But good zobo, she added with a wink. That's all me. Evening. The sun setting over Ayatoro in shades of orange and gold. Mama Ngozi was closing her stall, wiping down the table, covering the groundnuts, sealing the zobo containers. Her hands moved with the muscle memory of 15 years. She spoke quietly, almost to herself. They say be careful with your words. They say the tongue is powerful. They're right. I learned that the hard way. She paused, remembering that Monday morning a year ago when a small lie seemed harmless. I told a lie that almost destroyed me. But somehow, and I don't pretend to understand how, that lie became truth. Not because lies are good. God forbid. But because God can use anything. Even our mistakes. Even our foolishness. He can take our chaos and create something beautiful. She folded her cloth, packed her things. Do I regret what I did? Every single day. Would I do it again? God forbid. Have I learned my lesson? She laughed, a warm, self-aware laugh. Ask my husband. He'll tell you I barely talk now. Practically a monk. She picked up her bag, ready to walk home. But here's what I know, words have power. Use them to build, not destroy. To speak truth, not fiction. To bless, not curse. And if you must gossip. She grinned. At least make sure you're gossiping about yourself. Life continuing its ancient rhythms. Children playing football in the street. Traders closing their stalls, calling out goodbyes. Generators humming. The smell of evening meals cooking. The village at peace. Mama Ngozi walks home, her wrapper swaying with each step, her head slightly crooked as always. She passes the palace grounds. On the balcony, Prince Adeyemi and Folktale sit together in the cooling evening, her head on his shoulder, his hand on her growing belly. Talking quietly. Laughing. Happy. Mama Ngozi sees them and smiles, a real, genuine, uncomplicated smile of someone who'd learned that sometimes the universe has better plans than our lies. She continues home to her husband, her children, her small house that almost got sold but didn't. And that's how a zobo seller accidentally became a matchmaker. Don't try this at home. Seriously. Don't. Mama Ngozi's stall. A peaceful Tuesday afternoon. Business as usual. A young woman approaches, maybe 22, eager-faced, the kind of energy that suggests she has news. Mama Ngozi. Did you hear? She leans in conspiratorially. The Oba's younger brother is looking for a wife. Time stops. Mama Ngozi's face goes pale. Her hand freezes mid-pour. The cup of zobo she's holding slips from her fingers and crashes to the ground, red liquid splashing across the dust like a crime scene. Flashback images assault her, the palace. The debt. The desperate bride hunt. 3 million naira. The terror. She stands up so fast her chair falls backward. Points at the young woman with a trembling finger. Out. The woman blinks. What? Get out of my stall. But I just wanted to. I said out. The young woman backs away, confused and slightly frightened, as Mama Ngozi advances like a woman possessed by the ghost of trauma past. Suddenly, her husband appears from absolutely nowhere, like he'd been waiting for exactly this moment for 3 years. He's holding a broom. He chases the young woman away, sweeping at her feet like he's shooing a particularly persistent chicken. Go. Go. Take your marriage news somewhere else. We don't do that here anymore. Other traders are laughing, some cheering. This has apparently become entertainment. The young woman flees. Mama Ngozi's husband returns, breathing slightly heavily, and sits down next to his wife. They're both staring straight ahead, 1,000-yard stares of people who've seen things. Never again, Mama Ngozi says, her voice hoarse. Never again, her husband agrees. They shake hands solemnly, sealing the pact. Two survivors of the great wedding lie of 2025, united in their determination to never, ever go through that again.